Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. So for the people that have signed on, we want to get started. We've got a full workshop planned for you, and we hope you get the best of it. And I think to get the best of it, please use that chat and question period. I think that's where you'll get it. So we want to start off with welcoming you and also describe who's who in the zoo. I'll be speaking to that. My name is Scott Rouse. I'm managing partner with Energy at Work. Next, we're going to have Stephen Dixon talk about unlocking the power of RETScreen version 9.2. And I want to emphasize that word power, because that's, any software tool can do things, but when you actually start looking at what RETScreen can provide condo managers in terms of what the EWRB data holds, it's quite amazing.
Scott, I just wanted to add one thing, Scott, to that introduction.
Sure.
Is that 44 years ago, I got into the energy business, and I asked me to write a piece of software to do what today RETScreen's doing. It took 44 years to get here, but we're here now, and I'm really excited about this tool. Go for
Excellent. it. And then we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we're going to kick it up a little bit. And we're going to show some of the additional features that energy managers can use and helping condo property managers. We're not here to make condo managers, property managers, experts in RETScreen. We recognize they've got so much to do. I was quite surprised at all the responsibilities that a condo property manager has. And we're certainly not here to add to that list. And next is the power users. This is where I suggest you hold on to your seat, because Stephen's going to show you some really amazing things that Enercan has developed for RETScreen. And again, this would be more for power users. But I think knowing what the tool can use helps you ask the questions that need to be asked. And then we have Amir sharing measurement and verification with us. So often, condominium property managers get questions about this latest gadget to save energy, but how do you know that is actually achieving what you need to achieve? So if you can stay for the measurement and verification, I think you'll be impressed. And then finally, we got some case studies, wrap up and questions, and some key takeaways that you can use. So again, welcome everybody. I want to share, make sure the objectives are clear, and do the introductions. So when we talk about energy, water reporting and benchmarking, or EWRB is the acronym, the idea is that we want to take that data and we want to transform it into real action. So the annual EWRB reporting provides condominium property managers a super opportunity to look at what they're building and how it's performing over time. I often talk about we're on a voyage. We're not a destination. We're not going to do anything in 1 year. We're going to do it in pieces or in gradual improvements. So the EWRB is that time and once a year where we actually have an opportunity to collect aggregated data from the utilities and use it. However, the data is not always that friendly or easy to understand and use. And I recognize that and I respect that. Also, once you get that data, to actively review it, to use it, to understand and really take advantage of it is difficult. And I'll explain that in a second. But we want to welcome you to join us in getting a deeper understanding of what your building's doing. And we're offering the RETScreen tool as a way to extract those meaningful insights. So as I mentioned before, our goal is not to turn you into RETScreen experts, but to know that that information is valuable and can be used to provide insightful information to help you improve your building. So objectives are very clear. First off, we want to inform you on what EWRB is, and also the advantage of Energy Star Portfolio Manager. I want to apologize for all the acronyms. It's part of, unfortunately, part of the energy management industry. We live on too many acronyms. If we happen to use an acronym you don't understand, please put it in the chat and we'll make sure it's clear. But EWRB is Energy, Water Reporting and Benchmarking. And ESPM is Energy Star Portfolio Manager, two different things, but they fit together, and I'll explain how. Once the data goes into the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, it can automatically be transferred to the Ministry of Energy for their reporting, to the City of Toronto for their reporting, and also transfer to other purposes, such as RETScreen, which we'll talk about. We also want to provide you the confidence that making the time and effort to go through the reporting process and looking at the data can not only help your building, but in cases where you have a portfolio, Stephen's going to demonstrate how that can easily be uploaded into a whole portfolio for that purposes as well. So it's really not limited to a single building. It can be for portfolio buildings. And then finally, of course, our third objective is to see action happening. There's no point in sitting there with a database of information that you can't use. It's frustrating for you, it's frustrating for everyone. So we want to make sure that that data is used. Also, I talk about drinking out of a fire hose these days. It seems like there's so many different things coming at us that business as usual is not a strategy that really responds to the rising costs, climate change, all the different challenges. So that's what we want to be able to do today, is use the EWRB data to make it valuable for you and for your building. So first off, I want to give special thanks to RETScreen. I must admit, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wasn't as informed on RETScreen as I am today. I think it's one of Canada's best kept secrets, and I really extend our appreciation to RETScreen, not just for this workshop, but for their ongoing commitment, as Stephen will share with you in a few minutes. If you have any questions, concerns, RETScreen is very quick to respond, and they want to see the tool improve. We're up to version 9.2. I understand version 9.3 is coming out shortly. So they're looking for constant opportunities to improve, not just for condominium property managers, but actually for energy professionals worldwide. Also, CMRAO. The CMRAO has been just terrific in supporting the importance of education and for helping property managers understand what EWRB is all about and what they can do with it. Their educational sessions have been very supportive last year and again for this year. They have allowed 3 credits for this workshop. So again, I want to thank CMRA for all they've provided to this workshop as well. Most of all, I want to thank you for attending. We've had over 250 registrations. I don't know how many exactly. We're probably over 100 right now that are participating in this workshop. But it's these kind of events where we can actually bring people together, hear what's on your mind, and then take action to provide the tools to make it more beneficial for everyone. So we really thank you for participating. You're the reason we're here. We also would, again, encourage you to use the chat or question period for any information that we're not providing and that you're looking for. If we can't get it to you during this workshop, we'll do our best to follow up later. Also, we have polls. And the polls are really structured for 2 reasons. One is to allow us to better understand you and what you need, but also for you to understand what other people are thinking. So with that, we're going to jump into our first poll. Adam, can you help us understand how to operate this poll?
Yep, so you should see a poll come up on your screen any second now, saying understanding who you are. So just, if you're able to just click in, and as kind of participants come in, then I'll start sharing the results here in a minute.
That's perfect. Thanks very much, Adam. Adam is with No Energy as well. You've got a whole team behind us here while you're completing the poll. So if you're a condo property manager, obviously you click that one. A service provider, if you're helping the industry in any way. The third one is a government agency with the ministry, the City of Toronto, utility, etc. NGO, whatever, how best you identify yourself. If you prefer to pick other, maybe we haven't captured your role, by all means, click that.
So Scott, a little bit later, we're going to have another poll that's similar to this one, but it's going to ask about who might be a RedScreen user, what you might be doing with it. So we'll get a chance to maybe dig into a little bit of the detail on that one too.
Perfect. Yeah, we found these polls to be quite valuable, but of course, they're not valuable if people don't respond to it. So really appreciate you taking a few minutes just to click whatever you identify with best. It looks like we've got a lot of chat. It's Marianne, are you monitoring that?
Marianne is monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we've kind of leveled out on the responses here. We have almost 80% of people. So I'm just going to end the poll here so we can share the results.
Thank you, Adam. Interesting. So 57% condo property managers, as that's I'm not surprised. 15% service providers, government agents 8%, and others 20%. Stephen, it looks like we need a better way to define who's going to be joining us. That's something we can think about next time.
I'm just get a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Is there a penalty if you have not completed 1 year? I think referring to EWRB.
Yeah. The question was, is there an economic penalty by not completing an EWR report for 1 year? I'm going to give a two-part answer. You notice I mentioned economic penalty. So currently there is no economic penalty for the provincial reporting. So if you miss a year, really you're cheating yourself, but there's no penalty from the Ministry of Energy. However, the City of Toronto does have a provision for a penalty. They haven't exercised that provision, but it is written into the bylaw. So if you missed a year, relax. You're not going to be penalized. So I'm going to close the poll now.
Yeah. Scott, we have another question here. I'm a faculty of in engineering field, whether RedScreen is useful for higher studies. Absolutely useful for higher studies. A lot of institutions will use it. We always love to see people coming to the field with RedScreen experience. And if you reach out to RedScreen, they can help you. They have some resources for institutions of higher learning. Greg Lang is online, and maybe he can just chat in there what's available. But yeah, RedScreen definitely supports the use of RedScreen, and it is very useful. I had a gentleman that teaches at the local community college the other day, and he told me about some projects that kids were getting frustrated with because they weren't very practical. I said, have you ever used RedScreen? He said, no. So I introduced it. It turned around their course. Like it gave the students a real life project that they could work on. They used the case studies within RedScreen, which were real life projects. So it's absolutely useful. So.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. Amir and I did a presentation to Seneca Polytechnical Institute on RedScreen and the value of energy management, etc. And it's core to their program. So absolutely. So let me move on. So thank you very much for participating in the poll. Whoops. The speakers today, I mentioned briefly at the start, it's No Energy. Stephen and Adam Dixon have been involved. Well, Stephen's been involved for well over 40 years. Very passionate about education. Does a number of workshops for BOMA, NRCan, different groups, and really focuses on wanting to use the analytics to understand. One of the favorite phrases I've heard from Stephen over the years is let the data speak to you. I think too often we hear people jumping to conclusions without setting back and just listening to the data and seeing what is actually being said. Amir has a similar expression where you need to think about what's happening. My favorite expression is listen with your eyes. Let's actually see what's happening before we jump to conclusions. And, does it make sense?
So RedScreen has the tools to give the data a voice.
Yes.
That's exactly what it does. It gives the data a voice.
So, and then Energy at Work, we obviously do EWRB reporting. We've been doing it for a number of years. I was sharing some of the results we've got. We also do existing building commissioning, certifications, etc. Our claim to fame is our Energy Management Action Plan. And that's a platform that we've developed over the last 30 years to really help organizations position themselves to take advantage of certifications, incentives, energy reductions, technologies, etc. That was I talk about the process. That's the process that we use. But together, No Energy, Energy at Work, NRCan, we're all working together in order to support sustainable solutions. We believe strongly that there are better opportunities out there, and the data can lead to those opportunities. So really, overall, our objective is for better and sustainable results. We're not looking, we want to make sure that if we do something, it lasts. So a little bit of history on EWRB and also the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. There's a lot of different, the ministry and also the City of Toronto has a lot of YouTubes, etc. that's available if you're interested. But basically, Ontario introduced EWRB in 2018 for buildings over 250,000 square feet. So they introduced it for the large guys to get some experience. And in 2019, multi-res buildings were required to report if they were over 100,000 square feet. Today, buildings over 50,000 square feet must report, and this is a Ontario regulation, it's a law, that they have to report their energy and water annually by July 1st. The good news is when this was introduced, this goes back to 2015, the ministry, this is before it was actually a law, the ministry had extensive consultations. And what impressed and surprised me was that they really listened. They wanted this benchmarking to work. So Ontario Regulation 506/18, just to give you the official number, requires a licensed professional to ensure that the data is accurate. We wanted to make sure that it was garbage in, garbage out. We want to make sure that the data was solid and that we could rely on what it was using. They also did something which I thought was we asked for and they agreed to. Instead of reinventing the wheel and coming up with a complex way of reporting your data, they adopted instead to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager, ESPM. This is a very important step because it eliminated the need for professionals to learn a new process. So I think that you're going to find that having these EWRB and ESP connected is very valuable. Now, the City of Toronto introduced a bylaw 367, came into effect last year. It does include a penalty. We had that question about, is there an economic penalty? And yes, if you're in the City of Toronto and you fail to report, there is a provision for a penalty. Hasn't been introduced yet. But more exciting, or more what we are expecting to see in support of the City of Toronto's target to be net zero by 2040 is other items that are going to come down the pipe. And one is disclosure. I think at some point, buildings are going to actually disclose who their municipal address is, similar to over in Europe, where they get some sort of rating. And then we're also expecting to see emission performance standard. What that means is that they'll look at what your building's emission is on an annual basis. And if you're below that standard, there'll be no issues. If you're above that standard, there will be an economic penalty. What they're trying to do is to drive actions so that the emissions are reduced. And I imagine that that limit's going to go down over time. So again, it's still very new and we don't have all the details. Sorry.
There was a question, did the ministry add condo townhouses? Until last year, it was not added.
Did the ministry, sorry, the city or the ministry?
The ministry.
Well, as far as, I don't know specifically with condo townhouses. I'd have to check with the ministry on that. I know any building for the City of Toronto, any building over 50,000 square feet, they have to report.
There are a couple other questions in the chat as well.
Sure.
where can we get online training and certification for using Energy Star Portfolio Manager? As well as, can Energy Star Portfolio Manager be used only by professionals such as certified energy managers for reporting?
Okay, so Energy Star Portfolio Manager can be used by anybody. You don't need to have any training. It's a free software. Stephen's put something in the chat about getting more information on Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And that's the beauty of it. I've got other slides to talk about that. Why don't I move on to that, and then we can I can speak more to that. So with respect to the energy water reporting and also Energy Star Portfolio Manager, I'll spend a little bit of time on that. So the process, I want to keep it as clear as possible. I don't want to get into all the complications of reporting, but essentially what you do is you collect your data, energy and water, and this is aggregated energy and water. So if you're a condominium, you don't have to worry about going and getting all the electricity from every condo owner. That would be impractical and impossible. So what the ministry has done is it's allowed the utilities to provide aggregated data. So that way, we're not interested in one particular condo, we're interested in the whole building. And the utilities will provide that. Now, the building has to provide certain building information, square footage, number of suites, etc. That information is entered into the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, ESPM. Freely available, anybody can set up an account. It does have its benefits, and I'll explain that in a minute. And that information is then uploaded to the Ministry of Energy and Electrification, as well as the City of Toronto. A lot of people have complained of the duplication. I want to assure you it's not that big of a deal. Once the information is in ESPM, it's very doable to report to both the ministry and the City of Toronto. Now for the bad news. The feedback from the ministry, we haven't got any feedback from the City of Toronto. They follow basically the same as the ministry, is an email saying that the data has been submitted, which is great. And then they provide an Excel file. And the Excel file has 2 rows with multiple columns, but most of the cells are blank. It's really not helpful for property managers. Property managers need to have a lot more information to be useful. So I want to do our second poll. Adam, if you wouldn't mind setting it up. This poll is to reach out to the people that have been involved with EWRB, whether you're a property manager or whether you're a service provider. But what is the value to you or to your organization on the use of EWRB? If you find it extremely useful, it would be a 10. If you find it of no value, you'd put a 0. If you're somewhere in between, if you do it, let's say just for compliance, it would be a 3. So where on the scale from 0 to 10 for you or for your organization, if you're speaking for your organization, where do you find the value from EWRB reporting? So I'll give everybody a few minutes to complete that poll.
Got the link that I've put in the chat there for Energy Star actually talks about certification, benchmarking, how to register, frequently asked questions, training that's available. So basically everything that you could want to know about Energy Star Portfolio Manager is at that link. So
perfect. Thanks, Stephen. That's great. Yeah, there's a lot of information online these days, but what we wanted to do is really focus on how to harvest the data from EWRB. We're assuming that it's been around for a few years now, and I think a lot of people are used to reporting, but do they use it?
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Liz.
What's included in energy and how is it measured?
I need a little bit of elaboration on that question, Gavin. Like you said, what's included in energy and how's Energy Star, you mean?
Well, I can speak to the EWRB. So what EWRB requires in terms of energy is really looking at the building and what the building is consuming. So if your building is heated by natural gas, obviously that's has to be included. If you've got electricity, which obviously all buildings have, that would be included. If your building is for some reason heated by another source, maybe district heating, that would have to be converted and entered. So it's really, if you look at the building, what for EWRB purposes, it's all the energy and water that goes into that building.
And Energy Star Portfolio Manager can deal with all the energies, all the characteristics you're building in generating the Energy Star score. There's a question there, Scott, for you. For tenant managed buildings where obtaining utility data is challenging, what is the best approach for EWRB reporting?
Yeah, this is a very awkward question, and it's a very challenging one. We had some, especially industrial properties that were tenant controlled. The tenants were not participating and were not willing to provide that information. And both the ministry and the city are trying to deal with that. So I don't have a black and white answer for you. It's work underway to try and resolve those type of issues. So do we have the polls, Adam?
There we go.
Yep, results are in. And don't worry, someone said if they haven't reported, don't worry about answering this question. And if you haven't reported, it's not applicable to you.
So I'm pleased to see that there is support for EWRB. Some people obviously get no value from it. Hopefully we change. What we should have done, Stephen, is ask this question at the end of the workshop to see if we've changed anybody's mind. But you know, it's definitely very mixed, and I'm not surprised that we're getting this kind of response. And it's only been around for a few years, so we shall see if it improves. So let me carry on. Okay. Just give me 1 second here. Having a little bit of technical problems. Why isn't it working, Liz?
Scott, put your cursor onto the slide that you want to change and then use.
Yeah, no, it's something's not pulling up here. Just give me a second. I apologize. Why can't I?
If you click onto
Yeah,
the
there we
slide.
go. Okay, we're good. Okay, so I talked about the value of EWRB and you know what the ministry provides. So to put it in context, what we see is a lot of data that the ministry provides, and for anybody who's seen the matrix, it's like trying to spot, with all that data, spot something useful from it. I call it spotting the woman in the red dress. It's very difficult to use that information. And particularly because we're using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, the units are also, the information we get back from the ministry is also not necessarily clear. KPTU is a US measurement of energy. They use gallons where we use cubic meters. So it can be confusing for the board. This is where Energy Star Portfolio Manager is useful, because it converts all that, and we can utilize it. It also is the tool to meet both the provincial and city requirements to report. So ESPM certainly has its advantages for compliance, for benchmarking. It's trusted. There's no cost. Anybody can set up an account. Certainly has its advantages. It's also not perfect. Like any tool, there's limitations to what you can do with it. I've just listed a few up here. It's a great start, but we need something else to work with it to make it more useful for us. In terms of the value of EWRB, obviously, I'm a big fan of reporting your data. I think, you know, data is a window to improvements. It's just a matter of how to use it. I've also seen a lot of conflict at times between the property manager who's trying to obey the law and do what's required, and then talk to the board who's got to approve going forward. And so what we've done is we put a video together that can help explain the benefits to the board, and we're going to make this available to anybody, and you're welcome to use it. It's no cost. I'm not going to share it this morning because I'm running out of time. Whoops. But I wanted to share with you, and I've got some case studies later on in the program, but I was quite impressed. We did about 850 submissions over the years, and I'm starting to see people recognize the value of EWRB reporting. And in particular, there was this one gentleman, he was board president, he was the board treasurer, and he actually looked at the data, I guess being the treasurer, and he was able to work with the board and the condo property manager. And what they realized is that they can't do anything about rates, they can't do anything about taxes and other costs, but they can control utility costs by consumption. And they could see by doing that, there would be a direct benefit to their owners. So they really targeted utility reductions and utilized the information from EWRB and saw what was happening over the years. The second thing, which again, this is coming from a condo board president with the support of the condo property manager, a real teamwork evolved there, was that by improving their consumption, they could qualify for an Energy Star building certification. Now, if your Energy Star score is over 75, you are eligible, but you don't necessarily receive certification unless you go through the certification process. So I asked him, why did you want to spend the money to get your building Energy Star certified? And he said, we could see a potential to increase our asset value by allowing other people to see that we're in the top quartile in terms of energy and water performance. And to me, that was those two things he said hits the nail on the head on why EWRB is valuable for a condo. Here's just a little fun question and something you can take back when you're looking at it. You don't have to complete this question just in your head. If you're looking at the typical electricity per suite, the reason I picked per suite is that's what most property managers can relate to. With your electricity, is it 100, 1,000, or 10,000? Natural gas, in terms of cubic meters per suite, you get billed on cubic meters from Enbridge typically. So where would you be? And then the water use, what order of magnitude would you expect to be? So I'm going to jump to the answers given the time. So for electricity, it's about 10,000. You can now this is the aggregate kWh for the building. Natural gas, you probably get your natural gas bills. You can see if you're in this order of magnitude, and same thing with the water. So now we've got some benchmarking. Sorry, Liz.
Two questions. The first, condo boards often just want a quick user-friendly summary of our ministry data. Can we set up ESPM or RETScreen so that it automatically generates a simplified report for them without having to re-crunch all the numbers? That's the first question.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Assuming you put your numbers in, it will update.
And then the second question is, many condos are mixed use with retail, commercial downstairs and residential upstairs. Does ESPM let us break out energy and water use by type, or does the ministry just roll it all onto one total?
It gets complicated. The answer is what is practical to do for the ministry. They're looking for a total building package. They would prefer if you could separate it out. A lot of times that's not practical. And also for shared services, a lot of times two condo boards are using there'll be two separate condos, but they have shared services. So this is where, every situation can be a little unique. And that's why it's good to have a discussion. And you want to be consistent. So year over year, you're doing the same thing. Ideally, you'd like everything split up, but sometimes that's not practical.
In portfolio manager, Scott, there is accommodation for mixed use facilities. So in terms of the energy intensity or the intensity per suite, it doesn't do it, but it does in terms of the Energy Star score. They allow for some mixed uses within the building, and adjustments are made. It's not perfect, because it's a complex situation, as you say, but there is some accommodation there.
Yeah, certainly for Energy Star, I totally agree. For EWRB, quite often, especially for condo boards, condominiums are quite unique, and we get into all sorts of situations. So that's why I say it's not that black and white. But if you go to certifications, for sure, I agree with you. I just wanted to touch on the opportunities to improve Sustainable Building Canada. I wouldn't mind giving them a shout out. They had something earlier last year about the condo workshops they tried to put together. They wanted to bring they recognized they needed to bring the condo owner, the condo property manager, and a board member together, because it's really about, if we're going to make any big change, it's about people, about process, and it's about products. When we looked at our path that we've looked at through the last several years, it's really come down to these three things: people, process, products. If you want to get real, utilize the information, the data you have, and actually make a difference, you got to bring these three together. Sorry, Liz, another question?
Sorry, yeah, question came in a little bit late. Do these refer to the uses per month? I think referring to your.
Those were annual consumptions.
But in Portfolio Manager, the data is carried monthly if you've entered it monthly. And if that comes through to RedScreen, you can definitely do monthly reports. I'll demonstrate that a little bit later. So yeah, there is monthly capabilities.
Thank you. When we look at the data, the first Excel sheet here shows you what the ministry has done over the years. And you can see how many submissions. It's grown quite dramatically from the first year, 2018, up to now, kind of leveled off. In fact, it had a decrease last year versus the year before. And then it also shows the multi-res, how many have submitted data. And then we have the average EUI. EUI stands for energy use intensity, and it's equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot. So what we do is we take the total amount of natural gas, convert it to electricity, add electricity, divide it by the square footage of the building, and that gives us a KPI that we can use to compare our building with the previous year or compare it with other buildings. The graph below that is the information that we've collected, very similar results, maybe a little bit lower than what the ministry has, because again, we don't have as many buildings as what the ministry has to deal with. And can be a little bit more targeted. But it gives you an idea in terms of what the energy use intensity is. So with that, I hope I've been able to give you a good background or foundation on what EWRB is and how it works with ESPN, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and hopefully a little bit of insight into the value of taking the time to look at it. I'm now going to turn this over to Stephen, who will look at what RedScreen can do for a property manager, but also to energy management companies, because we have some who've brought in, are participating, and also to power users. We also have Amir going to be talking about measurement and verification. So I'll turn it over to Stephen, and hold on to your hat. You're into it for an exciting workshop. Thank you. Sorry, Stephen. I can't hear you, Steve.
Yeah, for sure. Scott, you can leave your camera on there, and that'll just help me to get some feedback, and feel free to jump in as I've done in terms of questions. So welcome everybody to the meat of sort of using Portfolio Manager data in RedScreen. Before I go through that whole thing with Portfolio Manager and getting the data into RedScreen, what I want to do is sort of just give a quick overview of what RedScreen is. And the way I like to describe RedScreen is basically as a toolbox. It has many different functions and features. We're just going to do a small part of it today. Some of the folks online from RedScreen have often have said nobody knows everything about RedScreen. I think Greg, who's online, and knows pretty much everything about RedScreen, but there's been so many people that have contributed to this tool. So it's very rich in terms of its content, technical content, its veracity as a tool as such. So, there's probably 400 or 500 people that have made contributions. I'm just one of those 400 or 500 people. So a very complete toolbox, and you're probably going to see maybe 10% of it today, maybe 15%. So you'll appreciate just how much is there. So what I want to encourage people to do is after this session, you're going to get if you haven't used RedScreen before, obviously if you have used it, you're going to want to use the new features, but if you haven't used it, use the 30-day license, load it up, okay, and go and play with it. And one of the, there's many features in here. I'm going to show you a few of them. One is called the virtual energy analyzer, where you can look at a building. It's like doing an energy audit in a building. I'm not going to cover this one today in depth. I'll touch on it, and it can be used within a portfolio as well. But also the case studies and templates, which show you how RedScreen has been used in so many different situations. So have a look at it if you want to become a user. Spend some time with it, and I think you can make an informed decision as to whether you want to subscribe in the long run for sure. We're going to be focusing today on the portfolio aspect of RedScreen, building a portfolio from Portfolio Manager. But then I'm going to show how the information that's accumulated in that portfolio, coming from Portfolio Manager, coming from EWRB, then can be used for benchmarking, for feasibility analysis, and performance analysis, the other key features of RedScreen. And that virtual energy analyzer is the other piece. So I like to say that there's 5 different functional aspects to RedScreen, and we're going to touch on all of them today, but the focus will be the portfolio at the heart and putting RedScreen at the heart of your information flow, coming in, going out, reporting, all those great things. So this is a wonderful chart which really shows from an enterprise customer's point of view all the things you can do. So RedScreen Connect actually provides you, and you'll hear that term through and through today. RedScreen Connect is that tool within RedScreen, that functionality within RedScreen, which allows RedScreen to connect to many different data sources. And ultimately, once the data comes in, it can be used for annual reporting, for monthly reporting. We can normalize the monthly, and we can get into detailed project data. What's not even shown here is the idea of sub-daily. And so I'm going to take it to that level too. So it's almost like there's a 5th level. You can do this on an individual facility. If you only have one facility, you can use RedScreen, right? You can actually, if you only have one facility in Portfolio Manager, you can bring it in. You don't have to create a portfolio. But if you have multiple facilities, that's where the capabilities of this tool really shines. 30, 40, 50 facilities, they can all be brought in. I know of a number of companies, property management, condo, or multi-residential property management companies that use this tool, and they have literally hundreds of buildings in the tool. So it is very capable, but you can do a thin slice through it too. And I'm going to try to give you that thin slice today, in a sense. So when it comes to actually opening the tool and using it, a couple of things I want to point out. You can go to the YouTube, RedScreen's YouTube e-learning channel, and you can see just a plethora of videos on how to use RedScreen. Once you get into RedScreen at any point in time, you may see a little thing called the e-learning option. You click that, and within the context of where you are, it's going to give you options for videos. So what they've done is they've linked specific videos to specific functions in the software. So when you're in there and you go, oh, I'm lost, how do I get help here? Well, you can get help by clicking on the text over here and seeing textual help like you're used to in many software tools. But now they've got this e-learning tool, which allows you then to pull in a video on that particular aspect of the software that you're looking at. So
Interrupt you a second there, Stephen. There was a request to maybe slow the pace down slightly, just as good information people want to take in. So
sure, okay, no problem.
If possible, we're on a timeline, but
yeah, that's good. And there is some. You can turn on the closed captioning, and it happens in different languages. So I apologize for that. Absolutely, we'll try to slow it down for sure. That's probably one of my greatest failings, is I speak too quickly. So as I said before, there are lots of features available across the enterprise. There's lots of aspects of RedScreen, whether you want to do it on an annual basis. I know the question came up earlier about annual. You can do monthly reporting. You can normalize with weather and other factors you're reporting, and you can get into detailed project data and eventually into detailed time series where you're down to hourly, or even for that matter, 15 minutes. And you can do it for one facility or multiple facilities. So when we're actually using RedScreen, one of the things that is important as you open it up is, you might get lost at some point. You'll go, where am I? Or maybe, how do I do this feature? How would Stephen or Adam or Scott use this feature in RedScreen? Well, there are videos which are linked through this e-learning option here. It's a little icon, and that will link you directly to RedScreen's e-learning channel on YouTube. There are labels. Any one of these labels, when you roll over it, it'll have a little question mark. When you click it, you'll get your typical type of textual help too. So there's lots of embedded help and videos to make your life easier when you're using RedScreen. All right. So I'm going to do a little poll here because I'd like to see who's out there and how you expect to be using RedScreen. So So Scott, you talked about the facility condo property manager. You might be using it for portfolio benchmarking and reporting, or maybe you're not going to use it. Maybe you're going to direct others to use it. So that's kind of the first level of user. The second level would be maybe an energy manager, somebody who's practicing energy, your consultant, or your technical staff for a larger company where they actually have their own energy staff. So you're going to be doing what we call smart energy management using the information. And you may be serving then the facility and condo property managers that fall in that first category. So you would be consultants to those folks. And then eventually we're going to have the advanced user. Those are the people maybe they've used RedScreen before. They could be any one of the above, but maybe you're going to want to get into detailed real-time analytics. And there's some pretty cool stuff coming when it comes to the real-time data. RedScreen can pull it in and analyze it and using it to flag certain things, and some neat reporting features coming in. So you might be the service provider then to the energy managers or to the property managers and condo property managers. So Adam, why don't we go ahead and release that poll here, and we'll take a look and see what the distribution of folks in the audience. This will help me because obviously I don't want to assume everybody's going to use it to a large extent. I maybe want to give people a sense of what they can ask other people to do for them.
Yeah, Stephen, when we had the condo boot camp for condo property managers specifically, that was one of the questions that they came up with repeatedly is, how do we know where we can get our information or how to get our information? They didn't necessarily want to be the doers, but they wanted to know how, who to ask for, who to trust. And I think that's an advantage of RedScreen is it's transparent. And anybody can pick up the tool and transfer that data to somebody else to look at it. So for measurement and verification, for checking, it's quite a nice tool. Even though you're not using it yourself, you can ask that the people that do use it to provide it to you.
So we're seeing about 50% of the people reporting roughly, and looks like we're getting I would say. Well, I'm gonna end the poll here. I think the numbers have stabilized. Okay, so I'm gonna end that poll. I'm gonna share that result. So, yeah, I would say that a bulk of you, well, 60% of you who have actually responded are that facility condo property manager who likely won't be users, but I guess it's my job to try to inspire you to have other people use it for you. Then obviously there's the consultants, the energy managers, the technical staff who could be doing this for you. So obviously we're going to provide a little bit of detail and a small group for that advanced user. So in terms of what I'm going to do, Scott, today is I'll probably go through I'm going to go through quite slowly on the first part, right, which is how to get the data over from Portfolio Manager, which ultimately is sourced from EWRB, and I'll show some basic reporting principles, show people how to use that virtual energy analyzer to explore opportunities in buildings and how that might fit within their portfolio buildings. And then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about and demonstrating some of the smart energy management features. And then I'll probably just use the slides to show, I've got some slides to demonstrate some of the advanced features depending on how time is going here. Okay. So there's a question about, do we have to download RedScreen on our device or can we use it on the cloud? No, you would have to download it onto your computer. Your device will have to be a Windows-based PC at this point, or if you have a Mac, you can use Parallels to run. It'll run actually nicely under Parallels on a Mac, but you'll download it. There are some cloud-based features. Greg's just put in the link to download it. You can download it now even without the license key. You can explore it. You won't be able to save things. Some of the features aren't available, but when you get their 30-day license key, you can actually try it out, put it in, and have the full functionality of the software for 30 days. All right. So let's have a look, right? Wow. Yeah, this is what they say about it was a picture's worth 1,000 words. So this picture is probably worth 1,000,000 words. But what I've tried to do here, and I'm going to simplify this picture as I go through. This really covers all the things that I want to cover today, maybe not some things in less and more detail. But ultimately, the key message out of this picture is that RedScreen can become the center of all your energy management functional needs when it comes to information, data and information. Data is basic stuff you bring in. Information is how you've analyzed it. So we'll start off with looking at Energy Star Portfolio Manager pulling data in, which maybe predominantly comes off invoices, and we'll bring that into RedScreen. We'll create a portfolio. We'll do some reporting. Then I'll demonstrate how you can actually look at a sample building, what we call an archetype, and see what opportunities exist when you're building. That's kind of the first section for the property manager. So this is something then you could ask other people to do for you. Then I'll move in.
And if I could just jump in, Steve, that NASA weather data, extremely powerful, especially when we're talking about natural gas and heating, being able to weather correct so that you can compare one year to another, very powerful.
So ultimately, yeah, you've got all the tools at your fingertips. So then I'll move into the section, the smart energy management, where rather than just looking at, say, overall benchmarking reporting, we'll start to dig down and actually we'll take the portfolio and we'll do what we call regression, some statistical analysis and Q-sums on it. And for those that have used RedScreen before, there's a neat feature where you don't have to go into all 20 files or 30 or 40 files within your portfolio. You can simply, from the portfolio, ask it to do all this for you, and then you can go in there and hand manicure the things afterwards. So it takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of it. And then eventually, and I'll talk a little bit about using the feasibility analysis to say, do a project, improve the insulation in the roof of your building, right? So once you've got that portfolio, you can start to do things within it, many things. And then eventually the advanced section is where we look at the ability of RedScreen to pull real-time data out of these meters. So not just invoice data through Portfolio Manager now, but real-time data coming into RedScreen once, but not just once, auto update feature. So ultimately, as that meter data changes, you can say, go check the meter every 5 minutes, maybe 5 hours, every 3 days, whatever you choose. And it will then allow you to create some pretty neat graphs. We found some pretty interesting results when we've done that, when we started to look at that hourly or even 15-minute data. So those are all the features I want to highlight today. Some of them I'll spend a bit more time on, some and less. But there's definitely, the slides will be sent out. And there's also a lot of online help, as I said. All right. So what we're going to do in this section, and I'll just go through it in the slides just to show what it is, and then I'll actually do it in the software. We're going to create and maintain a RedScreen expert portfolio using data from Energy Star and ultimately from EWRB, right? And the data we're going to use is for real buildings. We've anonymized it, but it is real buildings. We'll generate a portfolio-wide energy performance benchmarking graph in 4 clicks. So once we brought the data over from Portfolio Manager, I want to emphasize the ease in which you can start to report. We'll create a benchmark report basically in 4 clicks, right? Then we'll create a simple portfolio, right, report, right? Again, it's a matter of just making a few clicks and having it come up. It's the portfolio reporting tool is quite interesting. It's just point and click and then try it out and adjust your report. And then I'll finish off this segment by importing a couple of buildings in my portfolio. So RedScreen has these buildings they call archetypes. We can access the archetypes directly from the RedScreen interface. What I've done is I picked a couple of buildings that happen to be condo buildings or multi-unit residential buildings. And 2 of them, one of them is going to be a building which has a proposed set of measures to take it to a 40% energy reduction, right? So in RedScreen, we always talk about a base case and a proposed case. The base case, the way it is now, the proposed case, the way you want it to be. So one of the buildings I'm going to import to my portfolio, and I can put on my graphs, is going to be a low energy, a 40% reduction in energy building. The second one is going to be an 80% reduction in carbon building. Different measures, same base building. We'll have a look at where that sits on our reporting, and then I'll show you what one of those buildings looks like. This is where you can go in and kick the tires on whether you want to use this to do project work in RedScreen as well. All right. So what I've done here is I've simplified my picture now. So we're simply going to use data coming from Portfolio Manager, and ultimately, Scott, I apologize, I should have put EWRB on here, but EWRB basically feeds Portfolio Manager. So that goes to RedScreen, right? We create the RedScreen portfolio. We do the nice graphs, and this is the graph I talked about. You can get in 4 clicks. And then ultimately, we can import into our portfolio an archetype, right? A sample building that RedScreen has created for us, right? An archetype for low energy, one for low carbon, and then we can go and look at the feasibility of getting to low energy and low carbon. All right, so that's the first segment I'm going to do.
And you mentioned too about portfolio, but a single building as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. We can do all of this on a single building. In fact, if you wanted to, you could simply have a spreadsheet where data you had data in a spreadsheet somewhere else that you were using. You don't have to use Portfolio Manager. You can import that very simply into RedScreen, either create a single building or put it into a one building portfolio and begin to do the same thing. So RedScreen has, in fact, that's the way it started, right? The portfolio pieces, it didn't start out as a portfolio tool. It started out as a bunch of spreadsheets, which has evolved to a very rich system on either a single or a multiple building. So Portfolio Manager looks like this. Many of you have seen it. Here we have a portfolio of buildings. We have 5 sample buildings. Plus, what we've done here, just for reference point, Scott has taken from his consulting portfolio, he's taken a high-performing building and a low-performing building. So all the buildings that they work with, he's looked at them, ranked them. So we have a Energy Star 32, which is a very low-performing building, and Energy Star 99, which is a high-performing building. And then we have a sample portfolio of buildings ranging from about a 31 to a 91. Right? Now, that's the Energy Star score, going from 1 to 100. If you're 100 or 99, most buildings are worse than you. If you're a 31, there's about 70% of the buildings are better than you. It also lists the energy intensity per square meter. In RedScreen, we can look at that per square foot, or if we wanted to, we could look at it per suite. If we had the number of suites, we could enter RedScreen, we'll report then per suite. We have the ability to adjust that. Scott?
Yeah. Yeah, just to be very crystal clear, the Energy Star score you see, as Stephen's pointed out, the higher the better. Anything over 75, you're eligible for applying for Energy Star building certification, which is what I was talking about, that other property manager, but it doesn't automatically give you Energy Star certification. There's another step. So just there was some misinformation last year that property managers were told that if their score was 75 or above, they were Energy Star certified. That's not the case. It's just you're eligible. So it's a great indicator on how your building is ranking, but to go that next step of getting building certification requires additional work. Thanks, Stephen.
All right, no problem. And just for a time check here, we will do a break at 10:25, right? So I'm aiming, and I'm aiming to finish my segment by 11:15, just to let you know where we're going with time. All right, so I've just actually gone into a browser. This is Live Portfolio Manager. This is a sample account that I have, and here are a few buildings that are in that account. What I want to just show you right now is if you're a Portfolio Manager user, how do I get Portfolio Manager to share its data with RedScreen? Because it's not automatic out of the box, okay? What you have to do is you have to go up to your account settings. Hopefully my login hasn't timed out. And you have to go over here to software development, and you have to click on this yes button, and then basically you'll register, and you need in there to tell in the registration page that you're going to be using it for RedScreen, right? And when they see that, they'll approve your account. At that point, your account will be able to be accessed from RedScreen. And if Greg and Kevin, if I've misrepresented the process there, but I'm pretty sure that's what I went through, and that's what each account will have to go through in order to be connected to RedScreen, meaning allowing RedScreen to log in and pull data out via their API, otherwise known as an application program interface, right? So just make sure you do that. And that looks like I'm getting the thumbs up. Thank you, Greg and Kevin. So that's very important because you'll be frustrated. Yeah, so Fatina, for sure. So if you're in the home page of your Portfolio Manager, you start there. You're going to go to Account Settings right here. Okay, and in Account Settings, you're going to go over to Software Development. It sounds like you're a software developer, but no, you're just accessing what's called the Application Program Interface, and you'll click, will you be using the Web Services API to exchange? Yes. Okay, and then basically, you move down here, you hit register, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. But the most important thing is to say that you're going to be using it with RedScreen, because they know RedScreen has already developed the interface. You're not going to be using it to trial and error and build software. You're going to be using it for RedScreen, and they'll usually approve your account within hours. That's what happened for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the good news, Stephen, this is all being recorded. So Fatina, if you need to review it, you can always get the recording and go back over those steps.
Cool. That's a critical step in all this. So I think it was worth spending the time. Thanks for the question, Fatina. All right. So back to the portfolio. The next thing I'm going to demonstrate to you, I'm just showing you what I'm going to do. I'm sort of telling you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it, and then we'll review. So the next thing I'm going to do is open up RedScreen, and I'm going to log in right here, and I'm going to ask it to create a brand new portfolio for me. All right. And that'll take 2 or 3 minutes. RedScreen runs Zoom slows things down a little bit, but the next thing we'll see is a portfolio in RedScreen, right? And in fact, we can make the update, we can make it so that once that portfolio is built, that it will automatically check maybe once a day, whatever you tell it, you can check it to bring that data in, right? And so it'll ask you for confirmation first, but ultimately then we now have 7 buildings in red screen, all the information, all the Energy Star scores, boom, we're all done. I mean, it's that simple. It really is that simple. I was quite amazed. I've written software over the years, and honestly, the first time I ever, did an import into red screen from Portfolio Manager using the spreadsheet function, it was about 80 buildings, and it worked the first time. I worked in the financial industry with software, never works the first time. So I know I'm impressed by the ability of this tool and the programmers and the software engineers behind it. The next thing I'm going to do is show you, once we have that portfolio, then I'm going to show you how to create this report. I love this report. What this report shows me is kilowatt hours versus floor area of the building. Every pair of points here is a building. I set a benchmark, which is kilowatt hours. The slope of that line is kilowatt hours per square foot. So kilowatt hours per square foot, 12.7. That's the slope of the line. That's my benchmark. The buildings that are above the benchmark are red. The buildings that are below the benchmark are green, right? And by default, red screen assigns a 15% target. So the base case is the solid dot, and the hollow dot is the target, which is 15% lower. Red screen then plots both the base and the proposed case on this chart, and now we can look at everything in concert, right? We can see which buildings we need to focus on first. We can start to focus on these buildings, and then we can dig down, and I'll show you how to use the tools within the portfolio manager and archetypes to actually dig down into the buildings and figure out what we're going to do to improve our buildings, build those feasibility cases. We can do some nice reports like this, right, where we look at all of our buildings, right, over a year and the contribution to our total portfolio energy consumption. You could create probably hundreds of reports in red screen. I'm going to try to keep it simple. We're just going to do one simple one today. But once you get your data in there, you can play with it. There are also sample portfolios in there. So if you don't want to start to use your portfolio, you want to have a look at what other people have done, I'll show you where the sample portfolios are. They've done a great job of doing this. So what I'm also going to do then is I'm going to drag and drop, right, these archetypical buildings in here into the portfolio, right? And then I can then regenerate my benchmarking graph, but I can put the archetypes on the graph. So I can see, well, the archetype starts above, and the low carbon archetype actually gets us below our benchmark. So energy still falls short of the benchmark or the target that I want to achieve. So we can use this tool to sort of really gauge what we have to do. How deep do we have to dig in order to achieve the targets we're after? And then I'll actually show you how to go into one of these buildings, one of these archetypes. This is the low emission one, and actually look at the building. So we actually are going to look at the building in terms of the heating systems, the cooling systems, the building envelope, and it's pretty rich. The ventilation, lights, and so on. That's a picture, a summary of what's in the building with all the measures that are there. And then we can actually look at the carbon result, the low carbon result. So there's the emission screen where we see a 75% reduction in carbon, and it gives us an equivalence. We want to communicate that to others. And then over here, we have a level 1 financial analysis, which includes, we can bring in the project life, the inflation rate. It'll calculate for us the internal rate of return, the simple payback. We can actually go to a level 2. I'm not going to put it on the screen here, where we actually do income tax analysis, right? So there's a whole rich financial analysis engine which we can launch into. Again, everything really stemmed from our portfolio. So, and the folder itself, which contains the portfolio, looks like this. We have a portfolio file, and we have the 7 files, which are sample buildings, and then we have a couple of archetypical buildings. That's it. It's very easy to manage this from an IT point of view. You can share this on a drive somewhere. Multiple people can use it. So it actually works very well in that kind of environment. And if people are using red screen without a license, they can just be a viewer, so they can view your files to the extent that the viewer allows. So it kind of protects you from having people make unintended changes to your files as well. You can give them the ability to view, but maybe not change anything. So, and then eventually I'm going to show you what's called one-click reporting. We have a portfolio. We can create a report on the entire portfolio with one click, all right? So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go into red screen and actually walk through that. And I think we have about 15 to 20 minutes to do that, Scott, and then we'll see how it goes. So keep those questions coming. Hopefully I've slowed down a little bit, so I do appreciate that suggestion. Maybe you should have one less coffee this morning, Scott, right? So, all right.
I
So,
wouldn't want to give up the enthusiasm, Stephen.
don't worry, I won't. So ultimately, here's your interface. This is your interface to RedScreen, right? And I'll make reference to the top menu. This is kind of how I navigate. This is the left menu, which is all these standard kinds of things you do in any software, open, close, the settings, all that kind of stuff. This is the virtual energy analyzer. I just want to point that out because if you want to take a look at a building, right? You want to take a look at a building and see what it looks like, your type of building, go in there and have a look at it. And I'll show you how to do that, right? Then there are these things called case studies and templates, right? Very rich examples. There's many examples of things that RedScreen does. I'm just clicking on it here. Here we go. Here's the case studies. We can search this list quite fluidly, pull up templates, which are hypothetical situation, case studies, which are actual situations that you use RedScreen in. All right, going back to home here.
Yeah, one thing, Stephen, that I've always been impressed, and it's not your speed, it's just the fact that RedScreen is so responsive that you're not sitting waiting for the blue circle of death to go from one screen to the other.
Well, it's a little slower today because Zoom slows it down.
Sure.
Zoom, other packages don't, but Zoom seems to slow it down a little bit. But that's fine. That could be a good thing. There are a couple of example portfolios here. So if you want to have a look at a portfolio that's built out with lots of rich data in there, the NRCan example or the net zero example, if you want to look at an example of a very deep retrofit to get to low carbon, there's a nice waterfall diagram there. Have a look at those things too, right? These are a great way to kick the tires with this tool. Your 30-day license will allow you to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a portfolio, right? So I can do it a couple ways. I'm going to go open, right? And I can create a new portfolio that way, right? And after RedScreen. So I want to create portfolio. I'm going to call it my portfolio, right? I want to create a new portfolio. Okay, so there we go. So at this point, I have the ability to connect to Portfolio Manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply click on the connector here, right? Now, because I've done this before, RedScreen comes up and says, I remembered your username and password for Portfolio Manager. It says, where do you want to put the new portfolio that you're going to create? So I'm going to navigate to a folder here, and I always have fun doing this one. So I think I've created on my desktop. I want to go to my desktop, and I set up a folder here. So we're going to go to, let's see here, go down here. I always have fun with this one. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create make a new folder. I'm going to put it on my, there we go. That's on my desktop, new folder. So that's the folder I'm going to use, right? And I'm going to say, okay. So RedScreen is now going to place this portfolio. That probably takes the longest of anything, me navigating, that's just me. Place the new portfolio. It's going to create a new portfolio and place it in this folder. All right. So I'm going to click OK. And if everything works on the internet, and it's going to do it. So it's going to take, right now, I'd say about 3.5 minutes to do this. It's going to go out. It's going to open up Portfolio Manager. It's going to pull all my data over from each of the 7 buildings. And then it's actually going to actually do a little processing beyond that. It's going to actually pull data out of the on particular things. It's going to move some benchmark numbers over. It's going to bring my Energy Star score number over, right? So it takes a little bit of time here. Can I access the recorder webinar later on? So I think you're saying the recording of this webinar later on. Yes, we will provide the recording, and it may actually be, I think we'll probably be posting this one onto RedScreen's YouTube site too. So, but one way or the other, the recording will be available to folks afterwards. So as we're going through this, Scott, do you have any questions about this? Because it's going to take.
Any questions?
Yeah. Do you have any questions? I want to throw some
like
questions in.
No, I think it's. I'm always found this fascinating how RedScreen can just move this information together so fluidly.
Yeah, while it's doing this, I'm just going to reference some things in behind. On this screen too, you have the NRCan and the net zero example I talked about before. And then you have some other training and more detailed examples of portfolios. You also have on here all the connectors that RedScreen connect to. So there's many other software tools and databases out there, and RedScreen has built automated or what they call red screen connectors. What are some of the limitations of red screen? That's a good question for them. Well, I'm not going to call it a limitation, but a lot of people might call it a limitation. But red screen is designed to be very adept, right? So if you're doing, for example, not in the portfolio side or not in the real-time analysis side, but in the feasibility side, red screen is designed to be very adept. So there are certain things that it doesn't do, things it does very well. You can build a complete model of a building, right? And you can model that building against weather or climate data or across the course of a year. It's a monthly calculation, right? So if you're looking for an hourly calculation, which can carry a lot of cost to it, red screen doesn't do that. So whereas some people might call that a limitation, I don't, okay? I think it's an actual advantage. I've actually compared red screen against hourly simulations. And in fact, it turns out red screen gets you closer to a reasonable answer because it requires a lot of effort to do an hourly simulation. Red screen, it doesn't do power factor calculations. That's one, if you're looking at a building and the electricity use in a building, it doesn't do power, but you can do power factor if you're looking at the time series data. If you're looking at real-time data coming from meters, you can deal with power factor, right? So, I mean, it's hard to say what is a limitation. What I've learned about red screen is if I can't figure out a way to do things first, I can usually find a way around something, right? So not every piece of software does everything. Where wouldn't I use it? That's a good question. If I were doing pipe insulation, for example, right? If I was looking at insulating a pipe, I would probably use another piece of software that gets into details of insulating pipes, right? If I'm looking at insulating a building, I will use red screen because it's got a great building envelope model that we can use to model the heat loss and heat gain into the building. So there we go, 3 minutes and 32 seconds. Hopefully, Farzan, that's given you a few ideas. I'm not going to say red screen can do anything. I'm not going to be, so bold as to say that. It can't, but it definitely can do a lot of things. And, going forward, my email address is going to be on here. If you run into a problem later on and say, hey, I don't know if red screen can do this or not, please feel free to reach out to the folks at red screen. They're really good on their tech support, but also myself. So I'm just going to say, okay, right, do I want to open the newly created portfolio? Yes. So what it's going to do is open up to portfolio view. And just as it's doing this, it's created this folder for me. There's my folder. Actually, it's the wrong one. I have to pull. It's created my folder with all my files in it for me, and I can put those in a list format. So there's my portfolio. Boom, out of Portfolio Manager. And that actually also backs up the data I have in Portfolio Manager as well. Okay, so here's our portfolio. What did I say? I said a few clicks, right? If you have multiple properties on Portfolio Manager, is it possible to select some of them when creating portfolio in red screen? Now, that's a question that I don't, there is a way to actually bring in data for a particular building. That's a question I need to defer to the folks at red screen. I've never done that. I know you can bring them over and remove the ones you don't want, right? And then it will only update the ones you have in there. I'm not sure about the ability to select which buildings come over. So that's a question maybe we need to defer to the, you can create subgroups. Yeah, you can create a subgroup on the screen. So I can actually create a group here, right? And actually group buildings into it. I can create a new group, right? So, and I can filter this group in a number of different ways. So basically you can arrange your buildings into groups. You could delete buildings you don't want, and once they're not here, then it won't bring them over because it's only going to go and get the data for the buildings that you want. So, but whether you can actually selectively bring them over, not sure that's the case from the answer I'm seeing there. Okay, let's get to this graph. I have 102 EWRB buildings. How long would the import take? I was talking to somebody, red screen the other day, they had 300. It takes a couple of hours, but yeah. So yes, in the data work building by building. I would say you're looking at probably, this was 7 buildings and it took, took 3 minutes, maybe 30 seconds per building. There's probably some overhead time. So I'm probably say you're looking at like an hour for 102 buildings. Okay, let's go and create this report. Oh, I promised you. Go to the dashboard, okay? We're gonna create a feasibility. Well, actually, you know what? There's already a pre-refresh report here. I'm gonna refresh the screen. So it's gonna go out and make sure the data is all up to date. And then I'm gonna click on this report and I will see a report. which covers all the data we have. We can see at a glance, right? We can see all the buildings. We can see that we have basically data in 2023 for all the buildings in the portfolio. We have data going back to 2020 for a couple of the buildings, and then going back to 2018 for just one of the buildings. So we can actually see at a glance. Now, the one-click report, benchmark, okay? So I want to benchmark this building, everything I have, kilowatt hours per square foot, good, done, okay? I click that, and now it creates the report. Now I can add my target to it. I'm going to pick the benchmark for this type of building. Red Screen knows for this type of building what the target or what the benchmark would be, 12.7 equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot. Put that on there, and now we get that report that I showed you before. So how many clicks was that? I think that's about 4 clicks, right? From getting the data into Red Screen from Portfolio Manager, and now arranging a benchmarking report which shows all of my buildings. It shows the base case, it shows a proposed case for each building, right? This is the low performing building. Scott, you had a high performing building. This is probably the building, this could be this one over here. This is the high performing building. That's the best building in your portfolio. This is the worst building in your not your building, but it's the worst one you've seen. This building over here is one of the buildings, the sample buildings, which is a real building in Toronto, right? And the other 5 buildings are here. So some of the buildings are above the benchmark, some of them are below the benchmark, right? So I'm just keeping an eye on my time. All right.
Yeah, well, this is great, Stephen, because it gives you when you're looking at your portfolio, you know which ones to target, and I think that's what where you want to spend it. Also, we tend to say, well, look how badly performing these buildings are. What do we need to do? But it also shows the buildings that are doing well and why are they doing well.
Yeah.
So quickly you get a snapshot, and then you can build that support in to get the attention you need to go further.
Yeah, what's really neat about this one, because somebody might say to me, well, Steve, can you do this on, can you actually benchmark on, let's say, emissions or something like that, right? So we could go in here and actually we could build this report for emissions as well if we wanted, right? Same thing with, I'm just going to X out of this one. Same thing, this report here, let's say that I just wanted to look at 2023 and I want to look at monthly. So some of the things you can do here is I'm going to format this graph. All right, and I get this right. So I'm going to do this for 1 year, right? So I'm going to do it for a period. So I'm going to make it the last year, right? I'm going to have all data. I'm going to have the time scale being monthly, right? And let's see what that, and I'm going to make sure that, yeah, monthly here. Okay, I think this is going to do what I want it to do. Whoops, I did that wrong. So let's just take a look at that. That's 2024. That's what I did wrong. Probably ended up. So let's go with a particular year, right? So I'm going to set a begin date, right? I'm going to make my graph begin on 2023. So I'll go over here to 2023. There, January 1st, right? Okay. So now I should see what I'm looking for. There we go. That's the graph I was after, right? So now we see 1 bar per month, right? All buildings shown on here, right? And we can see the legend at the bottom. So you can appreciate, you can spend a lot of time creating your own private graphs here very quickly. Now, what I can also demonstrate here, let's say that that's all you wanted to do. You wanted to create a report on this in a PDF format to give to somebody else. I'm going to go across the top menu here. I'm going to click on report. I'm going to go click create report, right? And it's going to be a portfolio report. I'm going to click OK. So now it actually assembles a report for me, right? So now we can go in and we can dress this report up. We can change the titles and different things on it. These are all standard things, but we can adjust those if we want to. It creates an executive summary for me, right? Which shows me the 2 graphs. There we go. Those are the graphs that I wanted. Immediately I get this as an executive summary, right? I get a map. Actually, I get a map which shows where these buildings are, right? It uses the postal code and it puts the buildings on the map for me, right? It even segregates the buildings by type. It actually shows me in the report the portfolio that I have. So we'll see a portfolio view here, right, with the different types of buildings and what they are. Maybe if I don't like that, maybe I don't like that page. I'm going to show you in a second. I get rid of it. Then we go into the details and we can see the page on benchmarking. We can see the summary of consumptions in the building. So I don't like this page here. You know, I don't really need this one. It doesn't really add any value to the report. I'm going to get rid of it. So I'm going to go up here to Format Report, and I'm going to unclick this, right? And then I'm going to click on Check here. And what it'll do is it'll remove that page from the report. Now, does it delete that page so I can never get it again? Nope. Right, I could go back and turn it on again, but now I've got a report, and starting at the cover page, what do I want to do with that report? I can export it to PDF, right? Or I can send it directly by email, right? Or I can print it. So I have lots of ability. Like in a few clicks, I've gone from what I had in Portfolio Manager, and you can't generate the graphs in Portfolio Manager that we've generated here that are on this executive summary page. I've gone in a few clicks from my data in Portfolio Manager, real data, and brought it over and created this report. Now, for those that are really into creating more detailed things, there's actually a custom dashboard here where we can go in and we can create a palette or a canvas, and we can place the graph that we want, put our own words on it. So we can really manicure this. But for those that just want a quick report, quick and simple, and be able to send it out, you can do that. And remember, if you need help, a couple things. There is help here, which is the textual help, right? But there's also the e-learning help here. So this is how we create a report and custom worksheets, right, in RedScreen. This is a video. So you click on here, it's going to take you right to the video, and you can learn about how to do those things. So I think what I wanted to achieve, and we're almost to our break time here, Scott, which is almost perfect. I wanted to say is, okay, we started out with data in Portfolio Manager, which came from EWRB. And in a few clicks, we've worked our way through to actually creating a report, right, which probably could be used for many purposes. If you don't like that particular report, you can create your own ones, work with folks that can do it. So you can have your service provider create a particular report that you want. If there's not enough flexibility in the report writer, use the custom dashboard, create a custom report. So very powerful. So we've got some questions here. Is the data import from Portfolio Manager to RedScreen in real time? Yes, it is. So if I go into the update data feature here, and I turn on the auto update, yes, it asks me what frequency I want to update this on. So it will then, let's say I want it to check every 5 days, okay? So what it'll do now is it'll check every 5 days, all those buildings, right? I can filter the buildings too. As Greg said, I can create a group, and I can say only do it for a particular group, right? So I can create a user-defined list of buildings. So I can say click, which ones do I want to update, and it'll bring the data over for those particular buildings. So you've got like an amazing level of control here, getting the data in, updating the data, not even, worrying about doing it. You open the file some point 7 days down the road or 5 days, it's going to say, hey, do you wish to check the data in Portfolio Manager? Yep, go ahead and do it, and it's done.
We've got another question here, Stephen. Can I export any data from a figure in the RedScreen to Excel?
It depends on the situation, but yes, to a large extent you can. So for example, if I were to, let's go over to my dashboard, more so underlying. So what you would typically do, if you want to export, there'll be export functions up here, right? Now I don't see those here. So, and I don't see them here. So the way I answer that question is I look at the particular situation that I'm in. So, Kevin, you can maybe add in here. I can show you later on where you can do this, but in these particular graphs, it doesn't appear that you can export this data. Going back here, can we export this data? No, we can't export that data there. But then we can export the data up here. So here we go. So we can create a file and we can export the data on Portfolio Worksheet, export all. That's right. So in here like this. So yes, on the Portfolio Worksheet. Thanks, Greg. The export all feature up here on the menu. So it really depends on the context, what you're going to get, whether you can do it. But to a large extent, my experience is yes, you can do that. Even when you get into the granularity of the program, for example, you can actually export data on where all the energy is used in the building. It does some nice pie charts when you get in there, but you can do that automatically as well. All right, so I'm just going to, I'm going to leave my portfolio here. I'm actually going to save it here, to save that portfolio because I don't want to lose anything. And just to let you know, within the portfolio, RedScreen actually in the portfolio file, RedScreen doesn't actually contain all the data. It actually contains a summary of data in the underlying facility files. But ultimately, you you can actually access each of these files, which I'll show afterwards from the portfolio. So all the data is contained in a combination of the portfolio file and the underlying building file. So let's just go back to my slide deck here. So where I've got to so far in this demonstration, let's just work our way back, and I'll tell you what we're going to do afterwards. We did the portfolio reporting. I showed you the portfolio itself. What we haven't done is that we haven't done the virtual energy analyzer. So what I'm going to do is after break, I'm going to add 2 buildings, right? Which is the low energy archetype, which is the low carbon archetype. Then I'm going to take a few minutes and explore those buildings to show you what you can do to get an idea of what can happen in the building, how you're going to improve it, what are the measures you're going to have to put in place. But right now we'll do a break unless anybody has any objections, right?
I don't think anybody object to a break.
Okay, so let me bring the timer up here. I think we agreed to a 10-minute break, Scott, correct?
Yeah, that's perfect.
So let me bring my timer up here for 10 minutes, and then we'll depart for our break. There we go. Okay, so we'll see everybody, so to speak, in about 10 minutes. Well, welcome back, folks. Hopefully you've had a bit of time to refresh yourselves. I did too. And we're on to the next stretch here. And just to review what we're going to do is I'm going to add a couple of archetypical buildings to the portfolio. I'm going to then look at the graph to see those buildings, and then I'm going to jump down into those buildings and see where they, what's going on. Like I'm going to look at the deep emissions reduction building, which is like I think it's a 75 or 80% reduction emissions for a multi-unit residential building. Okay.
Just for everybody else, we started with about 150 people, and we're still about 150 people. So you're obviously maintaining interest, Stephen. So
that's good.
Yeah, it's positive. So we're within a good group here.
So what I'm going to do right now is I have over here. I've done this before, but I have a couple of buildings, and what I've done is, in order to get to those buildings, I've used the archetype feature of the virtual energy analyzer in a red screen, and I've selected a couple of buildings, saved them, and I'm going to pull them into my portfolio here. So I'm just simply going to pick the building up here. So I could have a building. Somebody could send you a building. Say, this is my building. This is my best building. You could send it to somebody, or they could send it to you. You can add it to your portfolio, and you can immediately see how that building is reported. And the neat thing about this is that for the buildings that we started with in the portfolio, these are all what's called performance buildings, because they simply look at data, the historical data, and the performance of that data. But these 2 buildings are what we call feasibility buildings. So they actually have what we call feasibility models, energy models of the entire building in there. So I've now added them to the portfolio. Well, they should appear in my reporting graph. So if I go over to my dashboard and I go to my real property over here, and I'm just going to click the refresh here to refresh, make sure all the data is up to date. So now I see my archetypical building. There's one of them there, right? Now the archetypical building, there's 2 of them. There's 2 archetypes, two model buildings. They both have the same base case. They both started at the same point. But one of them does a 40% reduction in energy, and one of them does up to an 80% reduction in carbon. So we can see here, there's the archetype. So there's the deep energy, or the 40% reduction in energy, and there's the deep carbon one. So by going to deep carbon, you also bring the energy intensity under your target benchmark. You have complete control over what that target is on this graph. That's up to you, right? And you in fact have complete control within the files as to what your target consumption or your proposed case consumption would be, right? So that's something that you have control over once you get in there. So, and then ultimately then this building would, if there was performance data for the building I've added, these archetypes, there isn't. So it doesn't change this graph. This is still looking, so this graph is still my portfolio with all the buildings in it, right? And I still have these reference buildings. I kind of put them in there as reference buildings. Kind of gives me a place to reference them to. And the same thing with these 2 buildings down here. These are reference buildings. I can leave these, I can filter these out. I can filter these out of my reporting if I want, just by using the filters. I could create a group here, right? And I can do the group either in a user defined way. So let's say, and I'm going to my parent group is all. So what I can do is if I go into this group, I can say, I only want to see these buildings here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buildings. So I could filter by, words or something like that. But what this now shows me is in this user defined group, and I can label the group, I can say, I can name this real buildings. right? Those are really my 5 real buildings, okay? And so now when I do my reporting, I can do my reporting upon that group. So I don't include, I'm not going to include the high performing buildings, the low performing one from Scott's portfolio. I'm not going to include the archetypes. So I go to my dashboard now and I go in here, right? So I have to click a refresh here. I'm going to modify this graph, format the graph, okay? And then basically what I can do is I can specify only the real buildings. Boom, all right? So now it takes the archetypes out, takes Scott's buildings out. These are your 5 buildings, right? So again, the features of this thing to slice and dice your data and filter it in different ways, you know, I can keep going on that one, but it's a very powerful tool. And whenever you need to update something, it usually puts up a little suggestion here. It says refresh required. I hit the refresh. And then basically what it's done is it's going to remove those other buildings here too, right? From this, if I turn on that. So I can format the graph and I can go into the group setting in here and I'm going to group real buildings. I get the same graph and now I remove Scott's high performing building or low performing buildings, right? So you can build, you know, multiple groups. You can set up groups in multiple ways. I just did a user defined group where I selected, but I could filter on different types of buildings, different sizes. I can filter on location. You know, anything I put in that file, I can filter on it, right? So I can actually create codes. My son Adam has done a portfolio where they created codes for different things, and they use one of the fields in the building as a code, and then he uses the codes to actually create different groups at this level as well. So a very powerful tool. But right now, let's go back to our all group, all the buildings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one of these archetypes. I'm going to open up the deep emission archetype. So this is the emission target of 80 to 90%. So I'm going to open that building up. The way I do it is simply double click on the building, and it's going to go in and open up that particular building.
Just make a quick note, Stephen. A lot of the federal funding programs and other programs require you to target a reduction in both emissions and energy. So this becomes a very great feature to have.
Yep. Yeah, and the federal government uses this tool quite extensively for their own buildings, right? I mean, they use it across the board. I mean, Greg can talk about all the different groups that use it in different ways. We've done work for many of the departments in helping them to dig deeper with this, and so this is a tool it's real and being used. This is not a theoretical toy by any means. So,
and I just want to reiterate, when I look at the list of participants, like I mentioned, about 150. They're coming from all walks of life, which is what's so great about Canada. We've got such diversity, and RedScreen does accommodate that with the various languages. So if English isn't your first language, RedScreen can accommodate that by having multiple languages, which we've had feedback from Seneca and from other programs that have said that's been a real advantage.
Yep. I think 38 different languages. Large percentage of the world. So this is a file. This is actually a building file. It tells me this is where the building is. If I want to model a building in feasibility, which is what I'm going to look at now, it's going to use this climate data, which comes from either a combination of ground stations or NASA data. Temperatures and radiation, solar radiation, and heating and cooling degree days. I go to the facility page. Here we see the type of facility. Right, it's an archetype. Now this is where my son actually used this field here to create codes. He put codes in here based on what type of building was, and then they use that to filter even better at the portfolio level, right? So in here we can pick, right, the units of measure that we use. Let's say we don't like to use meters squared. Let's say we like to report in square feet, right? So we just change the units. Now, does that change anything? No, it just changed what gets displayed in here, right? So ultimately, you have a lot of flexibility to control what units you use, and if you can actually, RedScreen will operate in both imperial and metric units simultaneously. You just convert back and forth. The most important thing is if I'm going to enter a floor area in here, this is a golden principle throughout RedScreen. If I'm going to enter a number in here, I want to set the units first. I want to say the units should be square meters, and you'll notice that the square meters are there's no decimals on that. But when I go to square feet, RedScreen has done the conversion, and in that case, I can see that there's decimals. So always enter the unit specifier first, and then the quantity, right? That way you don't mess things up. All right, so let's just take a look at the energy page here. In the energy page, this is where we model the entire building. And this building has a base and a proposed case, right, on each of its different aspects. So I'm going to show you just one of these, okay, the building envelope. Right, you're going to see how this building is modeled using the climate data. Here we see the base case, and here we see the proposed case. Now, if there's any improvements in this building, we're going to see it down the bottom. Well, they've actually improved this building for heating energy by 60% and 35% in air conditioning. And one way they did it was to tighten up the building, changing the infiltration rate in the building. We can scan our way up here. Here they've actually changed windows in the building. All right. So, and the costs are included. I'm just going to jump into this one. There are actually some really powerful databases in here too. So, where we have sort of prototypical costs for any kind of measures that might be included in here. So here we have window measures, and there's a database of costs there as well. So a very powerful tool, modeling a base and a proposed case. If you want to see it as summary, how this building uses energy, or at least where the savings are coming from, we can get a pie chart. If we go back to our summary screen and we say, let's display to me not the fuel saved, which means what we're avoiding consuming, but I want to see the fuel in the base case, the way the building was when we came to it. We do that, displays it on the screen, and it changes the graph for me. So it shows me where the energy is being used in the base case, the way the building is today. So I'm not going to go deeper into this one other than just to let you know that you can explore these. These archetypes are all in there. This is not something I created specific to this webinar. The way I go to it, I get to it, I'm just going to kill this graph over here, is I go to the front page, I go to home, I could do it from here, and I go to Virtual Energy Analyzer. So if you want to explore the feasibility analysis in a building, we can see what's possible in your type of building. There's scaling features in here too. You can scale this building to your own situation. There's the Virtual Energy Analyzer. You can pick, right now this is a multi-unit residential building. I could change it over to a mid-rise building. I can change various different things. If you don't come from the residential sector, maybe you come from the office sector, commercial, institutional, right? We've got data centers, we've got many. There's literally hundreds of buildings in here of different types. Explore them, have a look at them. This is an extremely powerful tool for understanding what you can do in a building. It's like getting an energy audit without actually going to the building. Now, obviously, it's not exactly your building, but then you can iterate it and move towards having your exact building model in here. At the very least, for those that want to get an idea what it takes to get to an 80 to 90% reduction, it's going to help you to do that. We see the emission reduction page here, 86% reduction, right, in carbon, which is a combination of electricity, respecting the factors for the generation in the grid, and also the natural gas. And then we have our financial analysis, right? And this one actually includes borrowing some money to do these projects. It gives you all the results here in fairly detailed fashion. So a very robust financial analysis. Again, if you want to learn about financial analysis in RedScreen, click on the video learning up top, and you get a nice little video which goes through how to use these particular tools. So I'm gonna show you something. Let's say I change this building. I'm gonna save it, right? And I'm gonna run back in here now. I'm just gonna close this building, go back to my portfolio. There's my portfolio, and then look, it says that building is being edited, so I can click on refresh, and it should update this. Okay, now any changes I made are included in the portfolio. They're all there. Okay. So that's basic.
And again, I just want to re-emphasize the speed of which it took place. You know, it's not. I've used some programs where you're sitting, waiting, but this is speed is incredible.
Well, I can promise you, if you don't have Zoom running, it'll be even quicker. RedScreen is quick. It is. It's just that Zoom tends to pull it down a little bit because of all that Zoom does with graphics and things like that. So,
yeah.
All right,
and we're all grateful for that.
Yeah, exactly. Going to go back to, so basically what we've got to now is a portfolio, which includes everything you see here on the screen, right? So, and you can move that portfolio. You can take that file, put it to a zip file, send it to your friend, and they can open it up and use it. It's a very, I don't know, I just can't say enough about the way they've engineered this tool. I've written software over the years, and honestly, what they've done here just blows me away. So, all right, one-click reporting. All right, so that's the finish of this one. So now we're going to take a look at the next group, the next detailed or more detailed group. This is where you're the energy managers, the consultants, the technical staff, right? So this is where we're going to start to look at building level monthly energy performance analytics based on the ESPM data, using automatic links to NASA weather data and on a portfolio-wide basis. If you've ever done this kind of stuff before in RedScreen, what you're doing is you put your data in, your energy data in, you get your weather data, you do your regression analysis, you generate some regression and QSUM charts and so on. I'm going to show you how to do that in a few clicks on all the buildings at the same time. So that's pretty impressive, right? And then we can go down and actually we can do more feasibility analysis if we want. And I'll just touch on measurement verification because that kind of stems from this. But really, this section is all about being able to automatically take the portfolio manager data and actually do degree days, regression, QSUM, M&V charts, all without actually touching a single file. It does it for you, right? And then after I'm finished, Amir is going to come back in and talk about then using this technique of performance analysis, which is otherwise known as measurement verification, to diagnose and troubleshoot building energy performance. So here, what I'm going to be working with then is I've added a few things. Really, all I've added here is this piece here, the statistical analysis, and the NASA weather data coming in to help us, right? Because the archetypes use climate data, which are embedded in every RedScreen file. We're now going to bring in real-time weather data from NASA. We can bring in it hourly. We'll bring it in daily for what we're going to do. Eventually, when I get into the real-time graphs, I probably will use it hourly, okay? So how am I going to do this? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Manage Portfolio feature, and I'm going to create all these degree days, regressions, QSUMs, everything else, right? And then I'm going to go down and look at what gets completed. So I don't have to touch a file. I can get to these graphs, which if anybody's ever done this by hand, it'll take about half an hour per file. RedScreen's going to do this in about 2 or 3 minutes on all the files, right? Saves you so much time. It can even pick the best regression. If you've got multiple regressions, it can test different combinations of variables, pick the best one for you, right? So it's, I've done this, like I said, 44 years ago. I used to do all this stuff by hand, so I so appreciate the value of doing it and doing it well, right? And I can generate this measurement verification chart, again, with a few clicks from my portfolio. So you start out portfolio manager, build a portfolio, manage the portfolio, end up with a graph like this, probably in no more than 10 clicks, right? I mean, that is just astounding. Project feasibility analysis, I can go in and rather than just looking at the archetype now, so for this building that I've created, I can go in and do a project. I can investigate doing heat recovery on the ventilation in the building, right? So very quick, right through to the answer, and then I can report on the results. I can bring that back into my portfolio. So if I do a project in a particular building, I can compare this building projects to the ones from the archetypes, right? So these are base case, proposed case, and savings, right? So basically what I do is I can report on the feasibility analysis on any or all of the buildings I have in my portfolio. There's just 3 that I'm going to have, or 2 if I don't do a project in building E. But as I add projects, this graph will become updated. All right, so let's jump into doing that. So I'm going to start out with going back to my portfolio again. So let's pull that up here. So here's my portfolio. What I want to do now is I want to take the underlying energy data, the monthly energy data. I'm not going to dive in there and show it to you yet. I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm going to show you what's in the file when it's all done, and you'll be very surprised at how much it does. All right, so I'm going to click on Edit Portfolio. And what Edit Portfolio, so again, Edit Portfolio from the ribbon bar up here. I have a number of things that I can do en masse in a sense of the portfolio. I'm just going to look at a few of them, okay? So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to create degree days, right? I'm going to create heating and cooling degree days. So it's automatically going to create heating and cooling degree days. Now, where's it going to get that from? Well, it's going to have to go to NASA weather data to get that data for that. And Kevin, tell me if I miss anything here. It's going to create consumption summaries for me, right? And I think that's about the only one that I'm going to need here. Yeah, that's right, consumption summaries. I'm going to do regression and analytics. So I'm going to create regressions. It's going to use heating and cooling degree days as the independent variable. That's what's driving the natural gas and the electricity. So it's going to do it on both fuels, not just one. I like to use what's called an end-to-end QSUM to begin with. I like to do a regression and an overall QSUM, and I can examine that for my change points and then start to focus in on a baseline. So I'm going to use entire duration. I'm going to ask it to only keep the best regression that it finds, and I'm going to ask it to use the R-squared a criteria to select which one is the best, right? The highest star scored, the model that gives the highest star scored is the one it's going to keep. If it finds any existing regressions in the file, I'm going to ask it to delete them, and I'm going to apply to all regressions, and I want a Q-sum chart. This is the cumulative sum of the difference between the actual and the predicted, and I want a measurement verification chart. And Amir will go into those in a little bit more detail. I'll just show you a glimpse of the result, but Amir then will take sort of my result and dig deeper and show you what you can do to find real opportunities. So did I miss anything here, folks out there? I've got the degree days, and it's going to pull that from, just to make sure, yep. So I think we're all good. Okay. So we'll find out pretty soon. All right, I'm going to save this. It says you're about to apply these changes to 9 files. You want to proceed? Yep. So it's going to do it wherever it can do it. So it's going out there and updating those files. So this will take a few minutes because doing a lot of work. And one of the things it's going to do here is it's actually going to pull weather data from the NASA cloud database for the time periods that I have. So it can actually construct from the average temperatures on a daily basis. It can construct the degree days for me. So we'll wait for a second and hopefully it won't get stalled on me here. It'll start running here soon.
But we had a good webinar the last, I think it was last year, where people are using these features and finding them quite helpful for their portfolio.
Yeah. So it's already got through to building D here in my portfolio. I can see it over here, actually modifying the files underlying. I see it coming up on in my folder. So it's, the folder is over here, so it's going through and changing the files as it goes and updating all those for me. This, I think, building D has a fair bit of data in it, so we'll see where it gets to here. And you can actually see in behind what it's doing, right? It's working on certain files. It's finished certain ones. Eventually, it'll update these all to this little marker here, which means I need to do a refresh. Now, oh, look, it's going pretty quick. So I probably won't find a lot to do on these because there's no performance, there's no historical data in these files, but it has to examine them and make sure everything's complete. So we're almost done. And you can see, there we go. It's successful. So I'm going to say thank you, right? And do you want to refresh? Because all the buildings now have an indicator that a refresh is required because the underlying files have changed. Again, RedScreen doesn't store all the data in the portfolio. It just stores a summary. So at this point, it's going to go out and update summaries, and boom, now I have a modified portfolio. Well, what do I have now? All right, let's go have a look. I'm going to open up this file right here, building A, right? And this building had a fair bit of data in it, and it will be able to take a look at what RedScreen actually did. I'll highlight to you what we started with. Well, actually, you'll be able to see what we started with, because once the file is open, it tells me where the data comes from. So it'll tell me that it comes from Portfolio Manager. So if there's any data I put in on top of that, I can do that, right? Then that'll be apparent as well. It'll tell me that the weather data came from the NASA cloud database, right? So at the end of the day, I know where all the data is coming from. It maintains the links to all that data. So when I need an update, it goes and gets it. I can tell it to automatically update things as I need. So it's, again, there's a fair bit of data in this file, so it's going to take a little bit to bring it in. But I think, if you've ever done this the long way, for those practitioners out there, it takes a long to do what it's just done in about 4 minutes. It would probably take, so it says there are files that might need to be updated. The NASA data, I don't need to, I know they're all up to date, so I'm just going to save a little bit of time by saying no, but it reminds me I might need to check that. So if you've ever done that, I would probably take me to do what it just did, probably an hour to an hour and a half to go through those files myself and do them all, okay? 4 minutes and a few clicks. Okay, let's take a look at what's here. So here's the facility, right? Here we have, the facility, the benchmarking information. By the way, you can change these pictures. Once you build one of these files, you can go in there and select an image. If that's not what your building looks like, you can go and pick your own building, drop it in here. You can put notes in here. And I always encourage people to use the note features wherever they can in RedScreen, because you may not be the next person that opens this file up. And if you can create this as a project tool, the next person is going to appreciate what you did more easily. I'm going to go to my data page across the top here. right? The data tab, data page. And it's going to bring up the data after. There we go. Okay, so what existed after we did the import from Portfolio Manager was the electricity consumption and the begin and end dates. That's all that came over from Portfolio Manager for the electricity. For natural gas, right, this all came over from Portfolio Manager, right? Fuel consumption, right? For the water consumption. And yes, we can do water, right? We bring the water consumption over, right, from Portfolio Manager. And it tells us that's where they came from, right? And in fact, we can, if we go into any one of these tables here, I can then basically turn on the auto update as well. So again, I have the ability to control how frequently it updates these tables. The NASA data, this is the one that like just blew me away the first time I used it, because I used to have to go to, you know, or Environment Canada, different websites to pull this kind of data. It's pulled all the data down for me. So the native data is the begin end, which is a day, average, min, max temperatures, relative humidity, all the way across to the to this column here. Any comments? But then what it's done, okay, so this is what it did in the last step. It created the heating and cooling degree days, okay? So it basically created for me how cold it is, how warm it is outside. Now, their cooling degree days are 0 in the winter, so that's why there's 0 there. Now, it also created a consumption summary. I asked it to do that. And the consumption summary then allows it on a uniform time base. Say your electricity readings are mid-month, the gas readings are mid-month. It brings everything to a uniform time base, which is monthly. It resolves it all to a common unit, which is kilowatt hours in this case, and it shows me the emissions, right, for each and every period. That's what we need for the reporting at the portfolio level. So these summaries are integral to being able to use the portfolio. Now I can build a file manually to look like this, okay? I don't have to use Portfolio Manager. I can jump in here. I can use a feature. I can go in here. I can bring in electricity consumption, and I can pull it from a spreadsheet. So if I got it somewhere in a spreadsheet, or if I have a green button file from my utility, I can pull it in that way as well, right? So there are many other ways to get data. You can build a file, just a one-off file if you want, okay? But in this case, we've built the file automatically. We've done very little work to get to this point, which I think has to be a attractive feature. Now, this is where the magic really, everything's magic to me about this stuff, I guess. I'm going to stop saying that. I'm going to go over to analytics. What it's done now is it's done a regression for me. All right, it's created a regression, and it's based the regression on heating and cooling degree days. So it's found that the relationship between electricity and heating and cooling degree days is somewhat valid. So it's created a regression model with an R-squared of 0.95. Remember, it's tried different ones and it's picked the best one, right? For those that are really into the details, it actually includes all the detailed parameters and statistics. I'm not going to go there right now. It's taken that model, right, the energy versus the heating and the cooling degree days, and it's created for me a Q-sum graph overall. Now, this one is a little harder to interpret, but I think, Amir, you're going to interpret this one later on. So we'd have to work with this one a little bit to figure out what's going on. But the one that's really interesting is if I look at the electricity one, and here I see a model, right? And then I see a Q-sum graph, which tells me something has changed in this building. I know from a Q-sum graph, if it's going up, that's worse than the average. That's better than the average. So what I would do here is I would probably just
Sorry,
go.
Stephen, if I can just jump in here for a second. This Q-sum, I know some property managers may not have used Q-sum, and I like what you've said in the past, that every building should have a Q-sum.
And there's actually a very strong analogy here. If you probably work with a financial person, and financial people like to give you a budget, and then you spend. So the budget is like the predicted in red screen using the model. The actual spend is like the actual consumption. The financial person would take a variance from budget. They're going to tell you you're over or under budget, and they're going to do a year-to-date variance from budget. This is a to-date variance from budget. So it's just a running sum, just like a year-to-date variance from budget. It's exactly the same mathematics or arithmetic behind it.
Yeah, it's very powerful. We use these Q-sums on all of our EMAPs, and we update it on a regular basis. So as Stephen pointed out, if you see it going up, there's an increase. If you see it going down, there's a decrease. If you see any change in slope, something has happened. And that sparks the conversation between the property manager, operations, your vendor. You possibly you were expecting something to happen beginning of the month. You've done a lighting job or you've done something. So you would expect to see it. Well, did it happen? So the key is extremely powerful.
What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to baseline this one. I'm going to use the first 12 months as a point of reference, or the first year. I'm just going to set months. I always like to do things in months, and I can adjust it in fine granularity. So it's going to be 12 months, not 1,272 months. There we go. Okay. And what I'll find is that my R squared will improve. And when I look at my QSUM graph now, I think Amir's turned his camera on because he's going to tell me what they did in this building. But here's my baseline. Here's my consumption reduction. So by the end of the, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, they've saved 830,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. I can actually put that on what we call, Amir's going to do this in more detail later, an M&V graph. I can highlight the savings, right? Maybe there was a period where they did some construction, but eventually they got into the savings mode, all green. Amir, do you have any comment about what this one is?
Not this one particularly, Stephen. We were interviewing with the operations team and management. They were referring to the lighting retrofit and other changes they made, but they were not sure. Now that is like a few years past, they were not sure what was happening at that time.
And that's not unusual, where you don't monitor your data. You go back 5 years, you did something. They probably spent money to do something, and they have no idea what they saved. But what I like to do is to go back and figure out exactly what people saved, and you'll talk more about that one later. So that's all I'm going to do here. But remember, what did I do here? How much work did I have to do? I went to Portfolio Manager. I built my portfolio. I told RETScreen to do the regressions and the QSUMs, not just in this building, but all the other ones. I jumped in here. The only thing I did was to take the baseline period from all the data to one 12-month period, and now I generate this graph, which in my world is a very distinct proof that they've improved this building, without a doubt. All right, a few clicks. Again, that's the whole theme of what I want to show here is that, and once you've got practice at this, I agree, I spend a lot of time doing it, but once you get practice at it, you'll be able to do that yourself relatively quickly. Now, the other thing I can do here is I can go in if I want to, and I can make this building into what we call a feasibility building, right? So I can click on all here. That will open up now the ability. You'll notice the top menu will expand here in a second. That will open up the ability for me to actually go in there and do, say, a lighting retrofit or here we go, energy. I could go in here and I can put a building envelope. I could do a roof upgrade. So all the things that we saw previously, so I can add a heating and a cooling system. So I could add a heating system, a boiler. I could add a cooling system, right? That could be a compressor or a chiller. I could add a building envelope component, right? Building envelope. I could add ventilation to this building, right? Go in here and click on ventilation. Oops, come back here. I can, where's my ventilation? Right here. Right, so now I've created a structure of a building, and I can go in and fill the details in and analyze the project. Boom, right? How quickly can you do that? And remember, this is, so I can build a building up incrementally. I don't have to build the whole thing at once either. If you go to a lot of those other simulation tools, they require you to build the whole building. I can go in here and start with a thin slice, just 1 or 2 systems, build a building, and enhance it. I know building operators, right? People that operate buildings that have their own model of their building in RETScreen, and they go, what if I change this to that? What if I do this? They can take suggestions up to management that way. That's not for everybody, but it gives you an idea of how creatively this tool can be used. So, and again, if we're in here and we want to learn about any of these things, it's all here, right? All of the internal videos or the internal help in the videos are here. All right.
There's a couple questions there in the question and answer. Is it, can a QSUM be done on hourly data, or does it make sense for monthly or yearly data?
Yeah, so the QSUM requires a regression to begin with. Now, in RETScreen, that's the way you traditionally would do a QSUM, is you would have a regression behind it. But having said that, so that would limit to daily, weekly, monthly data, okay? Because you can only do regressions on the minimum resolution is a day. But having said that, the whole technique of doing a QSUM, if you have a value that you're looking for, it actually came out of the statistical process control area. If you have a value you're looking at, you simply have that value in a spreadsheet. You can just take the difference between the expected value, your actual value, on an hourly basis, and then you can Q-sum that difference, do a cumulative sum. If you wanted to know how to do that, Adam, can you just throw my email into the chat? I will send you a spreadsheet. I did it for the random number generator in Excel. I ran a Q-sum to see how random it really is. It's not random at all in many cases. But I'll send you that spreadsheet. You could use that on hourly data, okay? So yes, you can do it on hourly. RedScreen doesn't quite do it yet, and there's a good reason for it, because doing a regression model on hourly data becomes really, really challenging because you've got latency. You've got a building responding. The temperature may change outside in a given hour. It may take 3 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours for that building to respond. So it's going to be, you have to be very careful in doing those kind of regressions. But ultimately, you can do a Q-sum on hourly data. And actually, you just given me an idea for a new feature in RedScreen. Greg, stay tuned for that one, because I know you've asked me about that. So thank you, whoever asked to answer that question, because you've triggered something in my mind. So, all right.
There's just a couple more quick ones potentially. So how does RedScreen consider monthly baseline energy consumption? I'm sure whoever asked that question, if you could maybe expand on that a little bit.
How does it consider? Yeah.
Yeah. The other one was, are you able to toggle projects on and off per building in the analysis?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, you are. Yeah, you are actually able to. You can, once you get to your include screen over here, right? I can go in and toggle projects on and off. Now that doesn't take the boiler or the envelope out of the base case, but it does turn that project off. I'm sorry, I don't have a project up here. It'll take a bit to load it, but yes, you can do that. You can pick, and the other thing it does is it allows you to interact the projects with one another. So if a lighting retrofit interacts heating or cooling, which it does, it interacts with it. When you toggle these things, all the interactions are manipulated for you. Think about that for a moment. That's incredibly powerful and valuable. If you do that, if you're using spreadsheets to do your projects, and you want to do that interaction, and you have to recalculate everything every time, all it is a click of a checkbox. Next question, Adam. Nope. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm getting excited now.
Oh, sorry. It was just that remaining question about the monthly baseline energy consumption. Oh, okay. You expanded. In the analysis, I saw a difference between actual and baseline energy consumption to estimate savings. How does RedScreen consider the baseline energy data?
Yeah, let me just pop that up here. Let me go back here. Which one am I working on? I just have to get to the right file here. Sorry, folks. Oh, I think I might have closed that file. So basically, go ahead, Adam.
Go ahead. No, sorry, I was going to start answering, but go ahead. I think you'll do.
Yeah. So basically, what it does is that the baseline is a model which compares the actual and the predicted values, right? And it develops a linear model in the case that we were just looking at there, and then it uses that model to predict beyond the baseline period. So the baseline predicted is what you would use had nothing changed in the building. The actual is what you actually used. In that chart, you saw the actual versus the predicted. The difference was what we think are the changes in consumption. Could be called savings, could be called an increase, could be called avoided consumption. I hope that answers the question. All right. So we can summarize all of this. Like if I have a project in there, we can summarize the projects in the portfolio view as well. And we can include things like payback, internal rate of return, net present value, all the financial indicators. So we can create a report and ultimately print that report of all the projects we've done in all our buildings or some subset of the buildings as well. I'm just going to see if I have a graph that might be able to answer. Yeah, so to answer that question better, this period here is called the baseline period in this chart. And the regression model defines the equation which relates electricity, in this case, to heating and or cooling degrees, depending on what we're using. So that's a linear model. We predict, using that model, what the consumption would be. So that's the upper line here. And then we compare it to the actual consumption. That's the lower line. And then the deemed avoidance or savings is the difference between those two. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and just a quick comment on that, Stephen. What I like about this particular graph is it shows initially there was an increase in energy. We always talk about energy savings, but we've seen time and time again, when we start a project, there'll be the initial, as the project gets set up, there will actually be an increase in consumption until the operations team take control and realize what's happening, and then steps are taken, and then we start seeing a decrease. So it's not always a increase, it's not always an energy savings. I call it holding up the mirror and seeing what is actually happening by looking at the data. And sometimes there's a legitimate reason for that. Increase in occupancy, the change in operations, etc. So it's really the way to see what the building is doing.
But again, keep in mind that I got to this graph with probably no more than a dozen clicks.
Yeah.
And I'm entering one number, which is the number of months from portfolio. Portfolio manager can't even come close. I mean, portfolio manager is good at a lot of things, but it can't come close to this, right? But you can use both of these tools harmoniously together and with this automatic interface now. I mean, you've got such a powerful tool suite. You can report your Energy Star score. Portfolio manager does a lot of data checking. When people enter data, a lot of times that can be errors. Portfolio manager can take care of that. Then you're bringing your good data through, right, to RedScreen, and you can get into this rich type of analytics. And we're not done yet on analytics, so but we are just about done on time for my segment. So what I'm going to do is, rather than going to RedScreen for the last section here, I'm just going to show you a few graphs. And my idea here, and we can certainly cover more stuff in the question and answers, but all I really want to do is, for those that it was a 7%, I think, online that were consider themselves an advanced user, I want these features, I want you to be aware of them. I want everybody else to be aware of them too, because they are extremely powerful features. They're probably beyond what most people would use, as you said, Scott, before, but if you've got somebody working for you, make sure they're aware of these features. So what we're talking about here then is actually bringing data in from meters via what we call RedScreen Connect. So this data is going to come in electronically from the meter. There's not going to be any bill in between. It can come in hourly. Adam and I actually bring data in from our houses on a 1-minute basis. We bring it into RedScreen, summarize it to hourly. So there's a lot of different connectors to do this. Again, we can report out at the portfolio level. We can bring in hourly data from NASA, weather data for my site. And if there's no climate data station near you, don't worry, because as long as you know your latitude and your longitude, RedScreen will localize where you are. Where we are, it's about a 50-kilometer square. At this latitude and longitude, it's about a 50-kilometer square, depending on what your latitude and longitude is. So you can get pretty local weather data from NASA on an hourly basis, typically updated to the end of yesterday. And then we can start to do some really cool stuff with graphs and analytics. And there's some new stuff coming in this area too, so stay tuned on that one. So connecting is pretty easy. We use RedScreen Connect. This is actually the connector for Meter Connects, which is one manufacturer's monitor or metering and data collection system. I need an API key, right? And then once I have the API key, which is provided to you by, in this case, Meter Connects, you put it in, and it will give you then a list of sites that are in that account, okay? You take the list of sites, you pick a meter from it, you tell RedScreen you want to map the electricity data into a consumption column, and basically click OK. And then the next thing you know, you've got, in this case, hourly data in RedScreen. Now, the neat thing is, I can add this data to existing data. So this is the portfolio manager data that already existed in the file. This is the same file I was just looking at. And this is the daily weather data. And here we're bringing in now this hourly resolution data, okay? And we can control what ends up in the consumption summary. So we can maintain our Energy Star linkages. We can keep updating that. We can do the monthly reporting. And now we have the ability within these files, which are linked within our portfolio, to actually bring in automatically, depending on what interval we want. We can update this thing every 5 minutes. Somebody sent me a file the other day. We were going in a meeting. I said, can you send me some more up-to-date data? He said, Steve, just click on the update link. Oh, yeah, because he sent me the file, which has the API key embedded in it. It had this key embedded. I didn't have to know all about that. And then I could just click on it and get the most recent data. This file becomes portable. This building file becomes portable with the links to the data. Very powerful tool from that point of view, right? Then we can go and get the hourly weather data. So before we were looking at daily weather data from NASA. Now we're going to bring in the hourly weather data, adds to the list down here, okay? And that's when the fun really begins, because now I can start to do things like aggregating the data, right? I can bring it up to 7 days. I can aggregate it to a day. I can aggregate whatever period I want, right? And I can also aggregate the weather data in a likewise fashion. This is one of my most favorite graphs. I'll tell you, 4 44 years ago, when I started out in this business, I had an analog power meter and I had a strip chart recorder, which created like on a thermal tape these graphs. And I used to stare at these demand profiles, right, over a day, a week, or whatever, and try to figure out what was going on in this building. These graphs lets the data talk to me, right? I look at this is a day or a week in the life of the building, right? So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I can march through the weeks. I can favorite a week. So maybe I found a week that has something that's really cool. So I click the favorite button and I can rename that. We found controls problems. We found compressor short cycling. We found elevator controls. You know, we found just a ton of things when we look at these graphs. Yeah. I can guarantee.
Sorry to interrupt, Stephen, but I'm just doing a time check here.
We're good. I'll be done. I'll be done real soon, right? So yeah, we basically, you know, if you've never done a demand profile, if you've never looked at the state on your building before, do it, because you're going to find things that you've never seen and you're going to find opportunities. You can look at a year at a glance with what we call a heat map. And then ultimately, then you've built this whole thing out. The heat map is so cool because it shows, you know, every line on that is a week, right? Right? And every pixel within that line is an hour. So that's the whole year at a glance. And you can do that in 2 or 3 clicks in RedScreen. Again, what did we do here? We started out with Portfolio Manager. We brought the data in. We did the monthly reporting. We did some monthly statistical analysis. We did some feasibility analysis, right? And then we went and we connected to meters that exist in these buildings. We brought that data in and we created those real-time analytics. And I think in the future there may be some alerts on some real-time analytics too as well. So if you're into the real-time stuff, lots of meters going in out there, let's use that data. My experience is most people do not use the data properly. So I'm not going to do a demonstration. I am going to turn this over to Amir so he can begin his little presentation on M&V, and you're going to, this is a real treat. You know, Amir did a lot of cool things with M&V, with non-routine adjustments in RedScreen. He helped me design a number of those things. He's written some papers. I think Kevin, Scott, you're going to introduce Amir, correct?
Yeah, I'll do a quick introduction. I've had the pleasure of working with Amir for close to 8 years. You can see his background. I've rarely met anyone who's so committed on wanting to really understand a situation. So I'm just going to share one story because we're short of time. This was quite an experience. We put a lot of projects with Toronto Hydro, actually 28 of them. And everything was going great. We used RedScreen to verify the savings. We had good cooperation, submitted an annual report. Toronto Hydro reviewed it. Everything was going great. And then we hit 2020 and everything hit the proverbial rocks and we were stuck. And nobody really knew how to move forward. Amir took the initiative to look at the program and what the basis of the program, which was efficiency valuation organization and IPMVP. And by looking at the backbone of what supported the Toronto Hydro program, he was able to approach Toronto Hydro, work with them to make the case, not just with them, but also with the ISO, that using EVO's non-routine events and non-routine adjustments, we were able to satisfy the measurement and verification requirements to get approval for over 16 million kilowatt hours by using option C. So I don't want to steal any of Amir's thunder, but I think it's really important to understand when we talk about measurement and verification, with energy efficiency, you can't measure something you don't use. And we're very fortunate to have the efficiency valuation organization. They've been around for about 25 years, and they've set up the requirements through IPMVP to allow you to use your baseline. There's adjustment period, and then calculate the savings. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amir. And Amir, please share your magic with us.
Sure. Thank you, Scott and Stephen. I'm going to be very quick. I know that the time is a bit short. Before starting talking about measurement verification and what it is, I thought that probably is best to let you know that why we are talking about measurement and verification, because this workshop is about EWRB and we can change it to actionable items. So B in EWRB is referring to benchmarking, and benchmarking can be done in different levels, self-benchmarking and benchmarking with other buildings. This is what we get from Energy Star Portfolio Manager when we can see our score. So if your score at 75 or 99, then it means that we are doing better than 75% or 99% of other buildings. But that doesn't tell us what we can do in order to improve, or how we did things differently that our score improved or basically went bad. So a measurement verification comes in play where we can do performance measurement verification by doing self-benchmarking. As Scott mentioned, energy efficiency is not something that you can directly measure. So it's the absence of energy. And measurement verification is a procedure that would allow us to be able to measure the energy efficiency. And this is thanks to a nonprofit international organization that publishes a guideline or a protocol that would allow us energy professionals around the world use the same protocol and come up with the same result. And this is very interesting and very, very instrumental for what we do in energy industry. And how RETScreen can help us to do this. EVO in the guideline provides 4 options for us to be able to quantify the savings. Option A and B, that is in micro level, we look at the equipment, we have to collect the data. And this is a key and probably a bit time consuming and sometimes expensive to collect the data. But we are at real advantage by having EWRB available, which is showing us how much our facility, our condominium building is used energy in last years in terms of gas, electricity, and water. And option C would allow us to create a baseline and see how much we are using within the baseline period and use that model in order to predict our consumption moving forward. And option D is calibrated simulation. I'm not going to get there, but our focus is going to be option C. We look at a few examples to show you what would be the benefit of creating option C baseline for the building now that we have EWRB available. Why MMV is important? Why we cannot just look at the bills? Why we can just look at the budget that we are spending on utility? There are other layers. Our buildings are dynamic, and a lot of variables that are impacting our energy consumption change month over month and seasonally. We have listed a bunch of variables. That number one is weather fluctuation. We know this year winter is a lot colder, so we are expected to use more natural gas. But how much more natural gas is acceptable? Are we not going beyond what should be using? Operational changes. Sometimes there is a complaint in the building and there is a change in the setting and the air handling unit set point temperature, pressure, etc. Occupancy changes. This is something that less impact the condominium sector, but Scott and I did more than 40 condominium and residential building energy audit post-pandemic in 2020. And for most of the properties that we look at, we saw the energy consumption went up as a result of a stay-at-home order. So if we don't have measurement verification, we don't know how much of the increase is real and is okay to have that amount of increase. And a bunch of other reasons I try to just go very quickly, but they are also equally important. Hidden inefficiencies. We know that resources in condominium sector is probably limited to have the maintenance person and the operation team and the good BAS. And so it is very probable that you have a sensor that fails reporting, and as a result of that, the chiller is not performing well into the best performance that it should be. So what we have available, we cannot definitely go and check the chiller or bring an expert to check our chiller if everything is working fine on a monthly basis. But what we can do, and is more convenient and probably more easier, is using measurement and verification for every building. As Scott and Stephen pointed out earlier, every building can have measurement and verification plan, and we can look at the problems in case there is a problem. Or we can quantify the savings if we are implementing projects or making investment in our buildings. And the other things is building errors. We have example that we had a building error and we were able to spot it thanks to having measurement verification. There are some misconceptions. I'm going to skip through it, but some people think that measurement verification is not needed because probably they are staying within the budget or the energy cost has gone up, so it's okay paying more to utility bills. But not having measurement verification doesn't give us insight to distinguish between how much energy is used higher this year versus last year, how much electricity, natural gas, and utility rate went up. So this is a very good tool that would allow us to better look at our consumption and verify if we are doing well or not. Here is the example of a condominium building that we started working with them, and they did report back in 2019 for EWRB. They are over 100,000 square foot, and at the time they reported their EWRB, so we had the data. We were retained to do existing building commissioning for this particular building because the board and the property manager wanted to improve the building performance. So we collected the data for them from 2018 when they had the amalgamated data for all the building in terms of electricity, natural gas, and water. So we created a baseline for 2018, and we got a very good R square. 0.97 out of 1 is referring to the fact that heating degree day or how cold the temperature outside is would explain how much gas we are using in the building. So very strong model. So we are confident in the model that we are using. And you use 2018 baseline in order to review what has happened in the building since 2019, now that we created our baseline. And we found very interesting thing. This is, again, because they wanted to move further to find and uncover inefficiencies going in the building. So we started seeing that in early 2023, the natural gas consumption started to go up. And this was exact same time when they replaced one mid-efficiency boiler with a high-efficiency boiler. So they were expecting to get savings. And this amount of increase probably would not be observable or something that they would realize because they are getting monthly bill and it's not weather normalized. The beauty of this Q-sum is we are comparing our consumption versus our baseline period on the far left and normalizing it with the weather. So if weather gets warmer, then we are using less gas. So this graph would take into account. So what we are having here is a real increase that is not explained with the weather. So even though temperature is changing outside, this weather, again, takes that into account. So we saw that the increase started to appear exact same time when they brought a new controller and the new condensing boiler. So when we did the further investigation, so what I'm trying to say here is MMV gave us a good insight what is happening in the building, but now we have to take actionable items, actionable things like EBCX. I was a good example of what we can do in order to address this issue now that we know our condensing boiler or the investment we made is not resulting to what we were expecting. So a bunch of issues came out of it. So we are putting in a finding list and letting them know. So they are going to make probably very small investment in order to make things tuned and hopefully up and running in the best performance that they could. The other example, this is not residential building, but we thought that is worth mentioning. This is a commercial building, and we have a 2022, as you see, the water consumption being very modest. In 2023 and 2024, water consumption and monthly profile went up. So we are talking with the operation team about what could explain the increase. So they were pointing warmer weather and increase in occupancy. Again, office building, we have increase in occupancy on a monthly basis. So, but that was never get flagged by the administration or accounting and operation team because this is kind of lost in a wash and probably they don't realize that they are having increase. So we realized that we can create a weather corrected model for weather. And in this case, there was a very strong correlation with the weather. So when summertime comes, we are having more water use as a result of running our cooling tower and irrigation. But how much of that extra water use can be explained with warmer weather in 2023 and 2024? And this is where our Q-sum again comes very handy, letting us to quantify and distinguish different things going on in the building. So we created our 2022 baseline. And since 2023 January started, where I'm hovering over, we started seeing gradual increase every month. That is referring to increase in occupancy. So yes, occupancy is increasing water consumption, but not to the order of magnitude that we are seeing on the QSUM. So we are seeing that summer consumption, when is weather normalized, so the weather is not a factor. Yeah, we definitely use cooling tower more water because it's warmer. But in this graph, the beauty of it is we are normalizing for it. We see additional 1,400 cubic meter water use in 2023 and 1,100 in 2024. So when we dug deeper from cooling tower and irrigation, we realized that cooling tower is working perfectly. Irrigation is we are having leakage. So we could do this type of analysis and root cause issues at a very high level with basically no cost. And now we are providing this insight or feeding that back to the operation team to go after the irrigation system. And now we can quantify and tell them, you're losing $5K a year when you are having your irrigation system leakage running with a leak running in summertime. So they can put it in the budget. So we are losing this much, so it's worth making investment. So I'm trying to tell you that we are going from very high level on measurement verification to come up with actionable item.
Well, just to reinforce that, all the data used there is in Portfolio Manager. It comes in automatically if you've got your portfolio connected, and now you do the measurement verification. So simple.
Exactly. Thank you, Stephen. This is another example that we're working with the building under EMAP, Energy Management Action Plan, that would allow us to update our MMV model on a monthly basis and talk with the operation team to see what is going on in the building. We saw increase in October 2021. And then when we talked with the operation team, they said that they haven't done anything differently in October, but the consumption went up. So we saw the issue on MMV, and then we investigated. And only thing we could point to was probably there is a billing issue. So we contacted local utility when they were providing natural gas, and we have this MMV graph that would support our conversation. So we contacted them, and they got back to us saying that, yeah, we made a mistake. There is a $17,000 credit in your next billing period. So yeah, this is a powerful tool.
Any of these things would pay for RedScreen. Yeah.
If I move on to the next slide. And that was, to your point, Stephen, was thanks to having RedScreen and our monthly follow-up with the operation team. This is another example. So we thought that, okay, sometimes is not only one factor causing your increase in consumption or decrease. There are multiple factors, and that needs to be investigated. I don't want to make it so complicated, but this is another building. We have been working with them since 2019, 2018, and we created a baseline. They did a lot of improvement, operational improvement, not major investment, and they were getting savings on natural gas. So what you are seeing is a QSUM for natural gas. And almost every year from 2018, thanks to all the effort that they made, they were getting natural gas savings with the amount of 50,000 cubic meter. And that went up to just the winter of 2022 or toward the end of 2021, when we saw that the monthly savings or seasonal savings we were seeing every year stopped. Instead, we are having increase in consumption. So when you look at, you're losing 50,000 cubic meter of gas that you would be saving every year, when you're replacing with 40,000 cubic meter of natural gas, altogether is like 90,000 cubic meter of natural gas is extra consumption that you have to pay for it. So when we flag this, we realized that, again, this is further investigation, that the building relative humidity requirement changed. So operation team needed to increase the set point for humidifiers and also keep them on a longer schedule. So this is a legit reason, but how much of the gas can be a result of this legit changes and how much might be something else is causing us to pay for the extra natural gas. And it turned out that there was a heating valve that was passing and was causing them to have this problem. So we quantified that, they put in a budget, they fixed the issue, and next year you see that they got back to the same trend, slightly not getting the same savings we were getting previous years because of they continue to use the humidifier, but the issue was resolved. So humidifier operation is causing them to pay a bit more, but they know the magnitude of it. They can understand it. I'm just summarizing it here. So if I want to put into a few highlights of what I covered, option C is very practical now that we have EWRB numbers, thanks to the rule that we have in Ontario, that the data is available, so we can use option C, very, very convenient. MMV would allow us to validate the savings for our investments. If you are doing lighting retrofit, chiller replacement, and boiler replacement, we have to have a MMV plan and don't stay with the promise. Sometimes promises are making or working if they are commissioned properly. So having MMV would allow us to verify what we are actually achieving is what we were promised. And if it's not achieving, then there is something going wrong, and that can help us to make sure that our investment is yielding to what it was promised. And MMV also would help us. If you are not making investment, you might think that we don't need to have MMV, but even having MMV without making investment is still a valuable tool, because it would allow us to see and spot if anything goes out of whack or out of track. So this is how MMV would help us. And the last but not the least, RetiScreen, we found it very, very powerful tool. If you wouldn't have RetiScreen, then every energy professional would have to work with an Excel sheet that couldn't be as transparent, as convenient, because we have a team all over Canada, some in the dead of pandemic, and they were working with the same Excel sheet, the same RetiScreen file. So having RetiScreen file would allow us even to work with the program sponsors like ISO or Toronto Hydro. What we do is create our MMV, is very transparent, and share with them, and they can verify our results. As Scott mentioned, we were able to achieve 16 million kWh, is all verified by Toronto Hydro. I tried to be quick, Scott, to leave time.
Oh, that's great, Amir. Really appreciate it. I'm going to be even faster. I'm going to take a note from Stephen's page and just go through this in the last few minutes. A couple of case studies, some questions, and key takeaways. So next slide, Stephen. So the case studies, really, this was the one that I mentioned before. The property manager and the board and the board president paid attention to the numbers. And as you can see in 2021, they saw that they were below average, and they took action. They did a energy audit, water audit. They did a bunch of things, and they were able to bring their costs below average, 12% reduction, or over 12%. Next slide.
Sorry.
And what I liked about the, using the EWRB process, very visual when you actually start looking at the numbers. And in this case, the board paid attention and actually utilized EWRB to help improve their building. Next slide. So City of Toronto is doing they will be producing a video, and they use this building as a case in point, reducing utility costs. Again, by EWRB made it a priority for them. They did get Energy Star building certification, and they did that for the increased asset value, and because they felt that they could see the whole property value increase, and it was largely due to the EWRB. Next slide. So here's another example. This was a very aggressive building. The property manager took this very personally, and by using the data, they wanted to see an improvement, which they were able to do. They got very creative on the financing, but they were able to actually get Energy Star building certification, which they were very far away from when they first started. And they did a number of things, but again, it was improving energy was the base, and then they did some more to actually increase the asset value at the same time. Next slide. So this is our fourth poll. We wanted to get feedback from you. You know, how would you rate the overall quality of this workshop? Did you find it was the quality was good, bad, poor? We're looking to get your feedback. How effective were we in helping to understand EWRB? I'll include Energy Star Portfolio Manager in there as well, and RETScreen. Was the presentation clear, useful? Could be better, we need to improve? Or did you get some, was it clear and actionable? And then finally, did this workshop meet your expectations? Was it what you expected? Did it fall short, or was it more than you expected? Adam, could you mind let us know what the results are? Just for your information, we still have close to 143 people here. So thank you for your attention and spending the time.
Yeah, I think we have to launch the poll. Adam, are you going to launch the poll there? If no, there we go.
Yeah. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
So again, there's 3 questions here. Overall quality of the workshop. This helps us improve what we do going forward. How effective were we with the EWRB and the RETScreen? And is this what you expected from this workshop? Did it meet your expectations, fall short, or exceeded?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it didn't save it, so just give me 2 seconds and I can.
Okay, thank you, Greg, for the answer about the alerts. And yeah, so I think that's an important one. You know, all these things that Amir has captured here, but you'd like to have them captured automatically, and that's the whole intent of this news bulletin feature, which will include sort of, you know, either sort of broad alerts and information, or very fine, detailed stuff, daily stuff, like Amir's talking about here. Amir, there was a question about the boiler in your first example. What happened to the boiler? And I think it was a control issue with that boiler, correct?
There was control issue. They were using condensing boiler in a non-condensing setting. So they were not taking advantage of low return water temperature. And on top of it, there was a chimney issue that we realized later. So there are other layers of issues, but the most part of it was the control. Yeah.
So Scott, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to move ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
To slide 100, where I'm going to talk about basically just to summarize, and then we can come back and see what people think when Adam gets that poll ready.
It's all good now.
It is? Okay, you want to launch it then? There we go.
Yeah.
I'll just move back there.
Yeah, we're starting to get items through the chat. So first one is overall value from the workshop. Second one is effectiveness between 1 and 10, 10 being good, and expectations again between 0 and
yeah, they're coming in there, Scott.
What's that?
They're coming in there, so
okay.
I'll just keep an eye on it here. Thanks, folks, for your patience there.
Yeah, we had a question about, can water be used in addition to?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, water can be used. I think the example that Amir brought was water actually being used and using the weather as the independent variable. Water is the dependent variable, the relationship between the two, so you can predict what water you should use based on your historical patterns, and then you can catch when water becomes a leak. I think we had a leak in the irrigation system, which would increase dramatically the water consumption. So yes, you can do water. That's just one example, many other ways to do it as well.
Adam, can we see the results, and then we'll move to the second poll or the last poll? Oh, good. So there was, for the first question, overall value, it looks positive. Thank you for that feedback. Second one, Adam?
Okay, just scroll down, Scott.
Oh, sorry. So then we go, this was effectiveness. Again, positive. Thank you for that feedback. And expectations, interesting. So we had Stephen and I battle back and forth on the we've got quite a diverse group here. So I'm pleased that you were able to get some value. Thank you. If you go to the final poll, I think it's shorter.
Oh, we had another poll? Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. Let's go back up here. This one here.
Yeah, just and this is more of information for Enercan and EW and CMRIO. Is there more information needed on EWRB Energy Star Portfolio Manager? Do you think there's or did you get what you needed? And then looking at RETScreen 9.2 and the advanced features, are you satisfied with really both of those topics? When we started this workshop back last year, we were really focusing on EWRB and Energy Star and how RETScreen can help. And then as we started working with it, we realized the power of RETScreen. And so we've kind of expanded the workshop. So really looking for you to say, would you like to see more information on either one of these topics?
All right, so Adam's still getting that poll.
Just launching it.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. There we go.
Perfect. So the first one is really about, is EWRB, do you need more information or are you satisfied? And the second one is RETScreen. Do you feel that, we scratch the surface or you want more depth? With the first question, I'm in contact with the Ministry of Energy and Electrification about with the provincial election. I think things have slowed down a little bit. I think they're limited to what they can do. But clearly, EWRB is not going away. And I think the city is definitely going to be pushing forward. I'm looking forward to seeing what the city is going to do with all the data. And then RETScreen is really how to take that EWRB data and do something with it. So whenever you're ready, Adam, you can share the results. So it looks like it's an even split. So I think some people have enough information on EWRB and they don't need to have any more, whereas there's others that would like some more. It looks like the second question about the RETScreen, there is interest in getting more information, and maybe we'll follow up with Greg on that later, Stephen.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Just to wrap up here, you can stop sharing there, Adam. I'll do that. Just to wrap up here, if you have to justify using RETScreen to somebody else or make a pitch for using it, here's some good slides I like to wrap up. Why use RETScreen? Simplification. There's a lot of things that can simplify in doing this. It's a tool that's designed to be very adept, very quick to get to the answer. We can have detailed analysis, but we need to be able to operate actually also at a summary level. So RETScreen is very progressive in that way. It provides standardization. So a lot of the databases built in, I showed one of them, the cost database, but there's lots of other databases built in to allow you to standardize your analysis across a team of people. Persuasion. I think you've seen that today. A lot of graphs and charts that can be very persuasive. Ones you haven't seen today, these little progress indicators that are built into the automatic or the custom dashboard. And finally, what today was all about was interoperability, the ability for RETScreen to manage data coming from lots of different sources and present it in a very compelling way. So you will get a RETScreen key. This will be sent out to you, a 30-day key afterwards. Please use it. Please give it a go if you haven't used it before. And please reach out to us and folks at RETScreen if you have any additional needs. Scott?
Yeah, thank you very much for attending and staying for the whole workshop. Obviously, Stephen put a lot of effort into it, as did Amir. We're very committed to wanting to share this information. And our way of returning your time and effort is the certificate from CMRAO, which is 3 credits towards your 10 credits you need for the annual license. So thank you for CMRIO for that. The video of the value of EWRB will be included in the email you'll receive with the 30-day license to RETScreen. Any issues with any of the above, feel free to contact us. There's the EWRB email for Energy at Work. And then we go to takeaways. I've got exactly 3 minutes, so I'm going to slow down a little bit so I don't rush. and make full use of the 3 minutes. So EWRB, yes, it's a law. As part of the Condominium Act, you're required to obey the law. But more importantly, you're not taking advantage of a real valuable source of information by not using EWRB. We received a piece of information from EPA that is urging utilities to provide this information because it's very difficult to get. In Ontario, the utilities are required to provide this information. It's a huge advantage to you. Don't waste it. The data is available. So again, I think energy management is something that we all have to look at, not just for cost control, but for climate and for other reasons. So what we were hoping to get across is that you look at the data, ask the questions, and seek the answers you need to make improvements. And then finally, a tool to help you navigate is RETScreen, and I think Stephen's done an excellent job in showing what it can do in a mere measurement and verification. I want to thank both of you, Adam, for the polls and doing that. That's great. If you want more information about energy at work, it's here. We do put out a newsletter. It's free, and we try to keep current on what's happening. There is a lot happening in our sector with respect to energy efficiency, climate change, performance measures, standards, EWRB, et cetera, et cetera. The good news is that we have people like RETScreen that are providing the tools to help navigate this interesting landscape that we have to deal with.